In the forest, a dissonant bird choir sang on the trees, and along the road a pair of horses drove a cart, tapping out a sonorous rhythm with their hooves. The girl ordered, turning to Elisa, that this time there would be no scenes. Elisa Verdier answered her older sister in a childish way, that at the last dinner party it was just incredibly boring, and she couldn't do anything about it. Shrugging her shoulders, she asked how she knew that a few glasses of sherry could get her so drunk. The girl was sure that this time it would be much more fun. She asked her sister's opinion on this matter, but she only smiled slightly. Chloe assured her sister that he really should curb his temper. She reported that this ball was arranged by none other than the Duke of Tees himself, and she believed that Alice should have found a potential partner. The younger sister said that she was well aware that the engagement was the only thing that could save their family from complete ruin. Elisa sadly admitted that she always hoped to find a person whose feelings would cover her head over heels. Chloe gripped the handle of her cane. She said she was sorry, and everything could have been different if only her leg had not been in such a condition. The girl sadly thought that she would really hate to have to put such a burden on her younger sister, and she believed that it was her fault. The carriage bounced on the bumps and unevenness of the forest road, and the tackle creaked mercilessly. The girl sat down closer to Chloe. She hugged and nuzzled her cheek. The younger one said that her sister had nothing to regret, and if anyone was to blame, it was their father. After all, because of his insane love for his mother, because of which he squandered his entire fortune on medical bills, and it was he who was completely unable to cope with the management of the estate. Chloe asked her sister to remember what happened 3 years ago. Then, despite their difficult family circumstances, their father allowed Duke Tees's army to use their castle. The younger sister continued her speech. She said that he was their father. However, she couldn't say for sure if he had a heart of gold or just a fool. Alice asked her sister if she had heard the rumors about Duke Thysse. She assured that there was not a single good thing about him. Some said that he was a young duke, and he led his soldiers to a great victory. But there were also rumors that he became the father of several illegitimate children from his mistresses. But then he secretly executed them. It was said that the man had a disgusting character, and if he was to fall under the hot hand of that person, he could completely crush him, not paying attention to the titles. And many thought that it would be better if he died on the battlefield. Chloe hugged her sister. She assured that considering the situation of their family, they were lucky that they were invited to such an event at all. Alice argued that even if it was so, then the Duke was not the person to be associated with. Ominous rumors surrounded the man, and they had no idea what his true intentions were. The youngest of the sisters expressed the hope that she would not run into that man while she was enjoying the festivities. Chloe sighed and reassured her sister that they would have to welcome the Duke, since he was the host here. The girl bit her lip in worry. The girl gripped her cane tighter with both hands. She told herself that she couldn't let fear take control of her. The action takes us back 3 years to the Verde estate. It was a snowy winter. Then Viscount Verdier, lord of the small castle, gladly opened the gates for the imperial army as it retreated. The girl, leaning on a cane, limped through the snow. 2 guys were discussing that this was Verdi's eldest daughter and she was crippled. Dvugoy was surprised how she could care for someone in such a state. And there were doubts whether she would become just a burden. The girl heard all this, but did not show it. His associate advised to leave her alone. He believed that the cripple simply wanted to help. 2 men watched from a distance as the lame-legged girl bandaged the wounded man's arm. The man with the mustache and beard said that he did not complain at all, and he considered this girl a true delight for the eyes, and he thought her face was pretty. In the room, the girl was waiting for a dinner that had been covered and cooled for a long time. A young servant entered. He told Chloe that His Grace had asked her to leave the wounded in the care of the servants. With a sigh, the girl sat down on the edge of the bed. She understood that she made her father worry, but she was also aware of the responsibility for the wounded. After all, it represented their pain, what they suffered, and what makes them stand on the edge of life and death. Soldiers with bandages on their hands sat on stumps near the fire. The fire crackled, and they were cooking something for dinner in the cauldron. Chloe limped to the window. She looked at the temporary camp. She was always taught that a nobleman's debt comes to the aid of the disadvantaged and the weak, and she sympathized and wanted to help the wounded soldiers. She heard the command, "Attention," and involuntarily shuddering at the surprise began to look more closely at what was happening outside the window. "Greet the commander," They gave the command again. A tall blonde man stood in front of the lined-up soldiers who saluted him. Chloe saw the commander for the first time. Her eyes widened and she froze in place. The man said that today afternoon, he received news of the death of his father, Wilhelm von Teisse. That was beheaded by the enemy, who decided to hang his head on the walls of his castle. The soldiers on the formation began to snort. The commander asked one of those standing in the first row if he wanted to return home. The soldier was amazed and hesitated to answer. Herzog summarized that it was not like what he wanted. The guy began to disbelieve his ego, and he said that on the contrary, he very much wants. The soldier sadly admitted that his wife had recently given birth to a child while he was here, and he wanted more than anything in the world to see the two of them. The commander asked the second soldier, who was older. He answered that he was worried about his sick and lonely mother, whom he had to leave alone. The third man said that he had to work to feed his younger brother so that he would not starve. The fourth assured that his bride was waiting for his return. Chloe could hear the desperation in the voices through the glass. The Duke said that as they see everything, there were many reasons why they should end this war and return to their homes. He said, standing in front of the ranks of his soldiers, that the same thing applied to him. After all, he could not take away his father's body, let alone hold a funeral for his repose. The commander reminded them that wars are not won or lost by God's will. That is why he refused to retreat. The Duke claimed that he would do everything to lead his soldiers to victory. And in the end, he was convinced that this was a matter of pride and dignity of the Teisse house. This was a speech by Damien von Teisse before the soldiers of the Imperial Army, of which he was the commander. Chloe stood by the window. Her heart was beating fast. Now all her attention was riveted by Damien von Teisse, and the young Duke told the soldiers that now it was up to them to embody their despair and longing, which they had shown him in action. People in rows raised their hands in a sign of ego support and agreement, and the girl at the window was overflowing with emotions. She was surprised how the commander immediately managed to raise the morale of the soldiers, and she considered him a more outstanding person than she imagined. On the street in the evening snow, rows of wounded soldiers greeted their commander, shouting, "Teisse!" The Duke was pleased with the impression made. At some point, he looked up and saw a girl at the window who was watching everything with interest, lost his vigilance and self-control. Chloe was instantly frightened. She realized that she had been careless, succumbing to instinctive curiosity and forgetting about tact and ethics. The girl jerked away from the glass, carelessly knocked a saucer from the windowsill onto the floor. She sat down by the wall and covered her mouth with her hand, blaming herself that their eyes had only just met. Gathering a little courage, she decided to stealthily look out the window one more time. The Duke was already leaving his soldiers with a quick step to their enthusiastic shouts. Chloe fell to her knees on the floor. She breathed out the emotions she had experienced and tried to calm the arising storm of feelings. She herself admitted that she would never have been able to do something similar after hearing about the death of her father. The girl kneeled down and began to pray. She asked the higher forces to allow these soldiers to return home, so that they can take care of their loved ones. The commander himself said that he hoped that the longing of his soldiers would bear fruit in battle. Chloe looked to see if anyone was there. She thought that she should hurry up and return before everyone woke up. She limped along the corridor, but suddenly a male voice called out to her, "Lady Chloe?" The girl stopped. She was overtaken by Gilles, a young servant of the mansion. The girl's cane slipped and the girl herself tripped. Chloe began to fall, but the guy deftly grabbed her by the waist. The girl smiled and thanked him for saving her. Gilles wondered where she was going so early in the morning. He believed that only yesterday evening His Grace had asked her to stay in her room. The girl assured that she would like to collect some medicinal herbs in the forest. She smiled and showed him the basket. The guy assured that he could do it himself for the lady. Chloe said that it is not known what they will do if he collects poisonous herbs, as he did last time. He scared everyone. Gilles was confused. The girl assured him that she would be calmer if she gathered the herbs herself. The guy said, agreeing with the lady's opinion, that it could be so, but he believed that it was unsafe, and the air, in his opinion, was cold enough. And the girl's father was worried about his daughter's health. Chloe assured him that there was no reason to worry. She said that she had already gone somewhere on her own many times. Gilles was sad. The girl was already leaving, and he asked her to be careful. The girl thought that when they first met, the boy's head barely reached her shoulder. She did not notice when he managed to grow so much. Further actions take the reader to the winter forest. The sun was just beginning to cast warm rays on the frozen ground. Chloe plucked green leaves of medicinal herbs, which were not afraid of the frost and hid in the ground itself. She thought that everyone worked so hard, and she wanted to be useful too. Suddenly there was a rustle. The girl interrupted the lesson on collecting plants and became wary. On the shore of the reservoir, she saw the Duke of Tissé. The man looked at the reflection of the forest in the water. Chloe was surprised that Duke Tisse was here at such an early hour of the day. The man felt that he was being watched. The girl was sitting on the snow, holding a cane with her hand. She hoped that no one but her knew about this place, and something told her that it would be better not to bother the Duke now. She was going to leave as quietly as possible, but she stepped on a dry leaf with a cane. The sound gave away her presence. The Duke asked, "Who's here?" Chloe froze in place. The basket of leaves fell from her hands and hit the ground. The man demanded to be named. He approached the girl with quick steps. She apologized to his lordship, and he bowed his head in front of the tall man, saying that she was Chloe Verdier, the daughter of Victor Verdier. The commander said that he noticed a pattern last night, and he took a step closer to the girl, but she looked at him with the eyes of a driven doe. The Duke said that it seemed to him that the eldest daughter of Verdi had a habit of spying on people like a little rat. Chloe humbly bowed her head, apologized if she offended him, and she swore by her name that she had not done anything like that now. The man asked if her words meant that she did it yesterday, and he assumed that her father ordered his daughter to pounce on him in order to seduce him. The girl was stunned by such a statement. The commander continued to rant. He said that Lord Verdier was not as naive as he seemed, and he considered him an ambitious person. Chloe assured that everything was not like that at all. The Duke grinned. He asked why, even then, a girl would put herself on display, treating the hideous, pus-filled wounds of his soldiers. The man said that at least Verdi's house had a low position, but he believed that such work did not suit a noblewoman, especially in her state of health. The girl was amazed. She asked herself if this was really the same person she saw yesterday before the formation of the soldiers, and she considered his behavior rude. Chloe replied that she was just trying to help those who went to war to protect their families, and she said that she did not expect that her title would become such a problem. The girl said that her late mother taught them that even though their family was insignificant in terms of its position, but they, as nobles, are obliged to come to the aid of those in need. She believed that this was exactly the kind of behavior the nobles expected. The man smiled back at her and hung over her with his whole body. He asked Chloe if it had occurred to her that trying to do something beyond her capabilities was not only presumptuous, but also created inconvenience for others. Herzog said that if only Chloe could hear the dirty jokes the men were telling while she was hobbling between them, and he was not sure if she would be able to keep her head so high. The man was surprised that after that she had said something to him about the noblewoman's behavior. He said that it would be better if her father did not hear such a story, and he admitted that if he were in his place, he would cut off the head of anyone who would dare to tarnish his daughter's name. The Duke touched Chloe's hair, brushing it away from her face. He said that his soldiers saw dozens of their comrades killed in battle, and he asked if she knew what it did to a man. He scolded her that it wasn't even dawn yet, and she was already wandering around the forest alone with her sore leg. He asked that if something had happened to her, who would be to blame for it? Chloe said that this land became part of Verdier's estate long before her birth, and no one dares to enter this territory without permission. She was sure that it was completely safe here. The man smirked. He asked if she would continue to carry this nonsense if he did it, and he snatched the cane from her hands. The girl was shocked. She tried to get her back, but the Duke did not allow her to do so. The Duke quickly planted the cane in the body of the snake that crawled next to the girl. Blood from the reptile's wound spilled onto the ground. He said that there is always danger in the forest. He considered her reckless if she thought otherwise, and he pulled out the cane from the already motionless body of the snake. The blonde examined the cane. He said that it was damaged, but the girl should have been able to return to the castle. The girl said that it was not worth it, and expressed words of gratitude to the Duke. He said that he could see that she had no temper, and he admitted that it was a surprise for him. The man lowered himself into a crouch next to Chloe. He lifted the hem of her dress and asked to be allowed to examine her leg. The Duke asked the girl if her illness was hereditary. She was amazed by his insight. She asked him why he continues to behave so rudely. Tissa hesitated for a while, continuing to stand before her on one knee. When the Duke got up, he answered her. that she was too sensitive, that he simply asked her a question and she already took it as a blow. He told Lady Chloe that if she let her emotions get the better of her, she would only lose. The girl raised her head and, looking directly into the Duke's eyes, said that she was not a soldier and now she was not going to war. His lordship assured her that life was a continuous battle, and this was especially true for people like her. Chloe replied that maybe it was like that, but she thought that this was still no reason to poke her nose into her life. He replied that he only wanted to give her advice. Herzog claimed that her reluctance to thank him was due to the fact that he touched her for life. It seemed to the girl that there was a devil in human form in front of her. She decided for herself that she should not have any illusions about him. Holding the hem of the dress, she decided to tell him 2 things with all respect for his lordship. The Duke nodded in agreement and said, "I'm asking for mercy." The girl said that at first it was about the cane that he damaged. After all, she needed it. Ticey assured, smiling, that he would talk to the carpenter as soon as he returned from the barracks. But the girl answered, "No." And she said that she would like a cane made of birch, which grows in the Duchy of Tees. The man narrowed his eyes. He asked the girl to repeat her request one more time. Chloe said that she remembered how he said yesterday that he would return from the war victorious. The man smiled lightly, and the girl continued that in the end one day he will return to the Duchy of Tees, and she would like him to make her a cane from his own birch. The man reached his hands to her shoulders. He caressed strands of her hair and called the girl "my lady," and he said that if he gave her something better. The girl rolled her eyes. Herzog said that it seemed to him that Chloe's father definitely wanted something more, and this brought him to the second point. The girl pushed the blonde's hands away from her. The girl replied that if her father praised his daughters in the presence of his lordship, then he did it exclusively because of his paternal love for them and his sister. Chloe said that at least her father loved and adored his children, but he was not so detached from life that he forgot that Verdi's house did not compare with the situation of the house of Ticey. The girl said that the Duke was not the only one who would prefer not to associate with an inferior woman. She was sure that the same applies to absolutely all men. The Duke coldly asked Chloe to save her self-deprecation for the diary. The girl replied that when it came to the truth, there could be no humiliation. She turned and limped away from the Duke. Chloe said that she wanted to make it clear that he could feel sorry for her, but so that he would not dare to think that she was unhappy, or that her life was like constant defeats. The Duke asked what it meant that she was happy living like that. The girl stopped. He said that nothing will ever change in her life. Chloe said that she was satisfied, that she likes to live a peaceful, unchanged life in the place where she was born until the end of her days. At these words, the Duke's eyes widened. She assured that this was what happiness was for her. The girl did not remember well how she returned to the castle after the collision with the Duke of Tees, but she remembered that all the way the cold morning wind enveloped her like a snake that she had seen in the forest. Our heroine was lying in bed. Her face was burning. Gilly came up and told the lady that the Duke of Tees and his men had just left the castle. The girl thanked him for letting her know. It was a long time before Chloe dared to return to that forest. Events bring us back to the present. The girls arrived at the palace. They climbed the steps to the front entrance, lined with an expensive red carpet. The sisters entered the castle of the Tees house. Alice said that she could not believe that this castle was used only for the Duke's entertainment, and only during 1 season per hour. She thought it was simply ridiculous. The sister took the younger one instructively. Elisa sighed noisily and said that she was already tired. But here they turned to her. The girl was surprised at the meeting. She said that it was wonderful to see Lord Cormier again. The man smiled in response to the greeting. Lord held out his hand and asked if he could be so impudent as to invite Alice Verdier to the next dance, but she answered that she would gladly agree to his proposal. And as if accidentally remembered, the girl introduced her sister Chloe to the man. Lord bowed politely, and Chloe said that it was a great honor for her to meet him. He assured that when it came to meeting her sister, Lady Alice, it was rather an honor for him. The guy said that maybe they could dance with her later, but when he saw the cane, he collapsed. The guy felt uncomfortable and began to scratch the back of his head in puzzlement. Chloe replied, getting the Lord out of his awkward position, that the sight of all these beautiful dancing couples in itself gave her pleasure, and she assured, smiling, that she really appreciates such attention from him. The musicians played another winding dance melody on the violin. Chloe watched as Lord Cormier and her sister circled in the dance, enjoying themselves. She was glad that everyone seemed to have already forgotten about the scene that Elisa arranged for the last time. She believed that Count Cormier could be a good match for Alice. After all, she had never heard anyone mention him in a disgusting sense, and his intentions seemed sincere to her. The girl felt that she was happy, and she wondered if this meant that she should say words of gratitude to Duke Tease. Chloe thought that she would prefer to avoid him if possible, but it could seem impolite from the outside. She wondered why he had invited them here. It could all be because their father helped him a year ago, as Elisa told her. But Chloe remembered the Duke's words back then in the forest. The man then asked if it had occurred to her that trying to do something beyond her capabilities was not only presumptuous, but also stupid, because it caused inconvenience to others. Chloe realized that the Duke did not look at all like a man who appreciated kindness. There was commotion and noise all around, and Chloe thought that there was hope that Duke Tis could completely forget who she was. She gripped the cane more firmly with both hands. A man was coming down the stairs. They started whispering and chattering in the hall. There were occasional shouts that it was the Duke with an appeal to look there. The girl heard footsteps and the rattle of a weapon next to her. Without looking up, she staggered to her feet and greeted His Highness the Duke of Tease. The man said that a lot of time had passed since their last meeting. He said that he remembered very well Lady Chloe from the House of Verdier. The Duke said that he was greatly indebted to her father, the Viscount, for his help 3 years ago. He assured that he would like to thank him personally, but he was too busy all this time. The guests looked at the couple. The man expressed his gratitude that they accepted his invitation. Chloe bowed her head and told his lordship that it was an honor for them to be here. Tease said that if he didn't ask too much, he could ask the girl to dance. The girl looked at him with bewilderment. The guests began to whisper what was going on in his lordship's mind, and they wondered how he could not see the cane in that girl. There were also those who assumed that the girl had done something that could cause enmity in the House of Tease, and felt sorry for the poor girl. Chloe told his lordship that she offered him her most sincere apologies. The girl said that she was afraid that she was not skilled enough to be his dance partner, and she herself thought that he had not changed at all since then. The Duke asked if the girl refused him because too many other men had already invited her, and he would have to wait his turn. He said that if it was so, then he hoped that she did not ask him to refuse in this way, assuring that he would very much like to dance with her. The girl ostentatiously placed the cane in front of him and leaned on it with her hand. A second man hurried up to them. Instead of congratulating him, he blamed Damien for again torturing an innocent young lady. The blonde asked if he didn't see that the poor girl was about to burst into tears. It was none other than Johannes, the first prince of the kingdom of Swangon. He said that the girl had already rejected the Duke's proposal, and he assured him that it was not very gentlemanly to continue pestering her insistently. The prince slyly asked the Duke whether he had really forgotten all manners while he was on the battlefield. Damien said that inviting a beautiful woman to a dance was not a violation of etiquette. The Duke assured the prince that Lady Chloe was not one of those who could easily burst into tears. Johannes put his hand on the Duke's shoulder, and he apologized to the girl on behalf of his cousin for behaving so rudely with her. Chloe just bowed her head in silence. At some point, the girl raised her head. He told His Highness that she believed that his lordship was only concerned about the fact that she could remain unclaimed without a gentleman until the end of the ball. Chloe asked the prince to take back his apology. Johannes was amazed. He hovered over the girl, and I was surprised at what a smart young lady she was. I asked what her name was, but she answered that her name was Chloe Verdier, that she was the eldest daughter of Verdier. The prince rested his hand on Chloe's shoulder. She even staggered from his weight, and he said that he would like to personally meet with the vicar. He said that he was intrigued by a man who managed to raise such a beautiful and brave daughter. Chloe was bowing at her feet. She asked His Highness for forgiveness, and she said that today she was here with her younger sister, not with her father.
But then the girl came to her senses and thought to herself that she had not seen Alice for some time, and now I would like to know where she went. She tried to look for her sister among the dancers, but in vain.
Chloe thought that she had been here not so long ago. The prince chuckled and asked her to introduce his sister later, because he was a little busy right now. Johannes, laughing, beckoned the Duke to come with him, beckoning him with his hand, and asked him to remove this sullen expression on his face. The heart in our heroine's chest made jumps, accelerating the pulsation of the whole body. She was overwhelmed by her overwhelming emotions. She tried to understand where her sister Elisa could go, and I really hoped that she would not get into any trouble again. The Duke asked Lady Chloe where her sister had gone. The girl shuddered all over. She replied that the ballroom was so huge that she could not see her, and she was going to immediately go to look for her. The girl almost cried because she was worried about her younger sister. The Duke grinned. He asked Chloe Verde if she remembered the earlier arrangement, and he put his hand on top of the girl's hand on her cane, squeezed it a little with his fingers. The man spoke in her ear, reminding them of their secret agreement regarding her cake. She replied that if he wasn't going to hand her a new cane, then let go of her hand right now. Damien asked her not to worry and promised that she would receive it soon. Herzog caught a lucky moment and snatched the cane from the hands of Chloe, stunned by such behavior. The man was twisting the girl's thing in his hands. He was surprised that she bought herself a new one. She thought that this man was simply unbearable. The Duke was grinning rather. He said that the girl seemed to be desperately trying to find her sister so that she could argue with him this time. Chloe turned away. She thought that it would be bad if she was drunk again and got into a story or felt bad. The Duke urged the girl to go with him. He held out his hand to her, palm up, offering her his help in the search. He agreed that his castle was expanded. Therefore, he, as his master, undertook to take her everywhere. The Duke asked the girl if he was going too fast, but she answered him that everything is fine. He noticed that Chloe seemed to have practiced walking on her own quite a lot, and I thought it was supposed to be terribly painful. The girl squeezed his hand, holding on to walk. She said that his lordship was too kind to her. The blonde grinned. He said that she still has a fighting spirit, or perhaps she has become more experienced. Chloe was shaking. She gripped the man tighter, and she thought that if she had not allowed the Duke to take her cane, she would not have listened to him now. The couple walked along the garden path paved with stones. Damien noticed that the wind had picked up here. He asked the companion who put these ornaments on her. Chloe begged for forgiveness, asking him again, but the man was waiting for her answer. Looking at her feet, the girl confessed that she had made her own decorations. Herzog said that it was not surprising for him, and he considered it a complete mess. Chloe asked him to please return her cane. He answered that he was not sure if it was worth it. Damien said that he was informed that a young girl had been seen running excitedly in this direction, and he said that he had a feeling that it could be Chloe's sister.
Our heroine remembered Alice, and as she instructed her not to get into trouble, she directly begged her.
They heard languid sighs nearby and stopped. Chloe was horrified. Her sister Elisa was hugging a man. He kissed her wherever he wanted, and she allowed him to do so, enjoying his caresses. Damien was amazed, though he looked reserved. And Chloe was just confused. Elisa pushed the brunette away from her. She ordered him to leave, and she said that they would kill him if they caught him. And he answered that he would gladly part with his life right here. She asked him please, calling her by name Eddie. Chloe was amazed. She remembered the conversation with her sister, but she admitted that she ran into a gypsy the other day at a village festival, and he turned out to be so intriguing. He told her that his name was Eddie. Elisa dreamily said that now she was burning with the hope of meeting him again. Chloe staggered at the shocking guess. It turned out that her sister had been dating this gypsy all this time. The Duke took Verdier by the shoulder. He anxiously asked her if she was all right. The girl bowed to his lordship, apologizing to him. The gypsy ran into the nearby bushes of the garden. Alice panicked. She excitedly said that Eddie appeared as if out of nowhere and caught her by surprise. Chloe harshly ordered her sister to shut up immediately. The young girl was trembling all over. Chloe offered her deepest apologies to his lordship and asked his permission to be absent for a second while she sent her sister away. Damien answered her as she herself wished. The girl briefly thanked him, and Elisa felt uneasy. Chloe coldly ordered her frightened sister to get back into the carriage immediately. Alice ran away in tears. Chloe looked after her. The Duke said that the name of Verdi's second daughter seems to be on everyone's lips again. The girl frowned at his words. Damien continued to add fuel to the fire. He said that the girl's talent became the epicenter of a scandal every time she appeared in social society. Chloe begged and begged the man. Her hands were shaking. She asked the Duke not to tell anyone about this incident. Damien asked her why he would hide the truth about her sister. He said that he was absolutely sure, and she was perfectly aware that no one would blame him if he ordered her family for the crime committed, which consisted in bringing a stranger to his estate. Chloe stood leaning on a cane and bowed her head to the Duke. The girl understood that their family was doomed if she could not convince the Duke to keep silent about what had happened here. Therefore, she had to persuade him by any means. Chloe knelt down and bowed her head to the ground. She said that it was all her fault that she could not follow her stupid sister. She asked Duke de Mainthysey to punish her instead of her younger sister. She prayed to the ego on her knees. The man coldly asked what she would do if he refused her this. The girl was shocked. Her heart beat uncontrollably, which seemed to ring in her ears. The girl told herself that it was necessary to come up with something without wasting time. She swallowed nervously, realizing that her father and Elisa were hanging on her. She said that the Tisa house is a family that values honor above all else. She reminded Demian that he was the only heir, an outstanding military leader who led his army to a great victory in the war, and the first to be awarded the Order of Merit by the king. The man ordered her to continue her flattering words. He made a disgusted face. The girl reminded him of his words that he would do anything to lead his soldiers to victory, and he would bring glory to those who fought side by side with him in the war. She reminded that it was at this time that the lord of the remote castle opened the gates to his soldiers and showed them hospitality. Although he himself did not take up arms, his support turned out to be invaluable. The Duke clarified that, in other words, the girl wanted him to return the debt, because that is precisely the custom of the noble house of Tissay. Chloe replied that she only asked him to show a little generosity to their modest family for past merits. Damian asked if he had not already repaid them by inviting her and her sister to the company of the most respected noble families of the kingdom. He said that Chloe should have blamed her own sister for trampling on this opportunity, and he asked if the girl had anything else to tell him. The girl grabbed the Duke by the boot and pressed him to her head. He asked what she was doing. The Viscountess asked only this time. If he could have mercy on them, she would do whatever he wanted. Chloe held the Duke by the boot. She said that she would never forget his kindness. The girl was in complete despair. Damian held her chin. He asked her why she did it, and he raised her head from the ground with his hand, looking into her eyes. The Duke asked the girl where the noblewoman who held her head high had gone. He expressed his surprise that now she was clinging to his legs and moaning that she would do anything for him. He said that it was not to her face. The sharp sounds of explosions and the evening sky illuminated by sparks heralded the start of the fireworks. The Duke guessed that the reason Chloe begged him on her knees was because her sister was missing. He understood that this was the only hope to save the situation of their family. Her or her sister's marriage to a rich nobleman was to take place, and this was supposed to be a shortage by calculation. If Elisa had married, the question would have been resolved. She had more chances for that. Young, healthy, and beautiful. Damian asked Chloe about her personal life. I was surprised that he didn't care about himself at all. The girl replied that she didn't care about herself. She assured that it is happiness for her to see people dear to her surrounded by care. The Duke asked if she was ready to do anything for this goal. The girl replied that she was ready to make all her efforts. The man frowned. He thought it was interesting. He said that then he should have thought about what Chloe could do for him in return. In the meantime, he advised her to return to the Verdier estate. He caressed her cheek. The girl replied that she would gladly do it, but His Majesty asked him to introduce Alice to him. The Duke replied that if the girl from this moment on tried to attract the attention of Johannes, or the second man in the kingdom, he would have to kill her and her family with his own hands. Demian ran his finger over the lips of the vicar Tessa. He said that his generosity had its limits. The man added that he advises to refrain from visiting this place with people whom she did not trust. He said that lovers often visit this garden to indulge their passions. He said that only if she does not expect that such rumors will be spread about them. They had to leave it separately. Chloe remained sitting on the garden grass alone in thought. She was trembling a little. She pursed her lips tightly and, following the Duke, thought what a scoundrel he was. Chloe was sitting in her father's chair in the study and writing a letter. His Highness Duke Damien Ernst von Tisa. Mr. Duke, I am writing with the hope that the letter will find you in good health. 3 months have passed since my return from the refined city of Svan, where the air is permeated with the delicate aromatic smell of roses. There is talk of a marriage between my sister Alice and the gentleman she met at the ball that day. Our family is incredibly happy because he is a noble man with high moral principles. I am well aware that these are all the fruits of your generosity. After thinking for a long time about how I can repay you for your kindness, I came to the conclusion that... The girl stopped and reread what had already been written, and she considered the last phrase redundant. It was 3 months later at the Verdier estate in the summer. Chloe sat, thinking how to paraphrase, preserved her dignity, but expressed her gratitude to the Duke. The door creaked and Gilles appeared on the threshold. The boy told Lady Chloe that he had brought her some snacks. The girl briefly thanked him for his concern. She asked the servant how Alice was doing. He answered that the girl went out for a short time in the morning, but since then she has not left the room. Gilles also reported that the young lady refused food, complaining of stomach pain. He placed the tray on the table, clinking the dishes a little. Chloe clarified whether her sister had met that gypsy again, remembering how she had seen them in a passionate embrace then in the Duke's garden. The guy said that he doesn't think so. It seemed to him that Lady Alice had grown up since that time. Chloe agreed with him. After all, she had to take everything more seriously, considering her engagement to Count Cormier. Chloe considered the Count a good man. Then he also held a high position in society. She hoped very much and was almost sure that her sister Elisa would be happy with him. After all, it will be a better match for a noble girl than a vagrant gypsy. Gilles turned to Mrs. What if Lady Alice got married that he was afraid that Chloe would be very lonely? The girl was surprised that the servant was so worried about her. He apologized and said that it was certainly not his business. Chloe assured that she will not be lonely. After all, she still had him, Gilles. She thanked Ego for the concern. The servant was already ready to bow, but Chloe stopped him. She said that since he was already here, why should he not look at her writing? And she said that she was writing to thank Duke Tis for the invitation to the ball. But it seemed to her that something was missing in the message. Chloe knew that the Duke was quite irritable. Therefore, no matter what she writes, he will still find flaws. Gilles began to reread her letter. The guy replied that if he had such a bad character, he would probably be no less angry if he did not receive this letter on time. A man burst in the door. He tried to say something to his dear Chloe, but he couldn't catch his breath from the fast running and the emotions that overwhelmed him. Father told her to get ready. After all, Duke Tis himself is heading to their estate right now. A smile shone on the man's face. The man said that the Duke was going to hunt with them. Chloe was stunned. Her father told her that as she knew, their Lesbilo was full of wild animals. The girl began to tremble a little. She could not understand why the Duke had traveled such a long way for the sake of pleasure. Viscount Verdier said that he learned about it quite recently, and it seemed that he would arrive earlier than expected. And our heroine again felt the coldness of the snake above her. The man said that considering the Duke's passion for hunting, it was not surprising that he was in such a hurry here. The Viscount, accompanied by his eldest daughter and servants, went out to meet the guests. He greeted his lordship. He assured that it was a great honor for him to receive him here. The man expressed the hope that the hot heat did not tire the Duke too much, and asked how he was doing. Duke Tis noticed that the vicar had much fewer servants than before. He confusedly replied that there had been a bad harvest in recent years. Chloe said that unfortunately the castle was still a mess. After all, they received the news of his arrival too late. But she assured that everything possible was done to make his stay here comfortable. The Duke replied that he remembered her words, that a nobleman who does not know hospitality did not deserve his title. Verdier's castle greeted the Duke with its hospitality. The Duke himself sat at the head of the table. The Viscount expressed the hope that his lordship would forgive them. He asked for forgiveness that his youngest daughter would not join them because she was not feeling well. Demian, smiling, expressed the hope that nothing serious had happened to the girl. The Viscount thanked Ego for his concern. The Viscount expressed his gratitude to the Duke for this magnificent meal that they had prepared for them. He apologized, because it was they who were supposed to occupy the guests and entertain them. Demian said that he enjoyed it, and he expressed regret that it seems that Lady Chloe did not like the dish. The girl said that it seems that the heat of this season affected her appetite. Herzog said that it would be useful to increase her resistance to weather conditions. Ficon said that it seemed to him that his daughter was a little nervous because of the presence of his lordship at this table. He said that his daughter loves the forest so much that she can be seen asleep with a book in the shadows. The Duke said that if this was so, then the girl must have known the area well. The owner of the castle said that everything is like that. Ficon assured that it would not be an exaggeration to say that the forest leading to the mountains was her personal garden. He recalled the case when she got seriously ill after returning from a walk, and yet after so much suffering, she continued to go to the forest. The Duke could not believe it. And the Viscount recalled that this was approximately at the same time when his lordship and the soldiers were staying with them in the castle of Verdier. Gilles poured the lady clean water into her glass. He asked my lady if everything was all right with her, and he said that she does not look good. Chloe thanked the servant for the water. The Duke said that if Lady Chloe loved the forest so much, he would like to ask her to accompany him on the hunt tomorrow. The Viscount sighed and said that she would only interfere with his lordship because of her condition, and he asked for permission to find someone who would be more useful in the hunt. But Demon's ego got the better of him, and he said that he would like to hear Lady Chloe's opinion. Our heroine clutched the hem of her dress with her hands. The girl knew that there is only one answer to the Duke's question. Chloe replied that if his lordship would allow her servant to lead the horse, she would gladly accompany him on a hunt in the forest. Damien answered her no. The Duke said that she was his lady, and that's why Chloe will go with him on his horse. He assured her that, as she herself understood, he was not used to following others. At the appointed time, our heroine was ready to go hunting. She was wearing a modest trouser suit. The Duke met her near the stables. Damien gestured and verbally urged the girl to join him. Chloe wondered if it was safe. After all, she used to take only leisurely walks on horseback but never hunted. The Duke urged the girl to hurry, but she didn't know if she could trust this man. Chloe handed the servant a cane and asked him to hold it. He asked my lady if everything would be all right with her. Damien sat astride, holding out his hand, and the vicar looked gratefully into the eyes of the servant Gilles. When the Duke and Chloe were already driving through the forest, he asked her that she must have been very close to that guy. The girl said that their servant Gilles had been with their family since he was very young.
She said that at the time when other servants were leaving due to unpaid wages, the guy preferred to stay with them.
And since then, for her family, Gilles has become much more than just a servant. The Duke spurred his horse, Tot galloped off. Chloe just gasped in fright and clung to the horse's mane. Damien asked the girl in which direction. He hurried her, specifying whether they should turn to the right or to the left. She stuttered and barely squeezed out what was left. Horses galloped, dogs barked. The Duke again clarified the necessary direction with Chloe. The girl shouted that they needed to turn left. The horse went into a trot. After some time, the Duke stopped the horse in a clearing. He growled and beat his hoof on the ground. The girl was catching her breath. Damien said that it looked like his people had caught a deer, and a rather large one at that. He said that Chloe really knew the forest well, and she thought that the Duke did it on purpose to torment her, considering him a devil in the flesh. Damien covered the Victasa's forehead with his hand, calming her fear of the fast ride. He urged Lady Chloe to breathe more deeply. He told her in a gentle tone that everything was over, and that everything will be fine. The evening descended on the Verdier estate. The windows of the building burned with a soft, warm light. Chloe said that she would send for a doctor as soon as it dawned. The Viscount was alarmed he heard about the doctor. He explained to his daughter what happened. The girl replied that his lordship had suffered during the hunt. She said that he was attacked by a wild animal, so his wound had to be examined by a specialist. The youngest daughter, fulfilled, asked his lordship if he had suffered much. The Duke said that he was wounded when he gave chase on foot. He realized that his desire to ride a horse did not give him the sharp sensations he wanted. The Duke stuck his fork into the fish steak. Alice told him that if his wound was small, Chloe could sew it up. She scolded her sister for bragging, but the girl continued her speech. She apologetically told the guests that their family did not have pain relievers on hand. Alice said that the Duke would have to endure pain in that case. Chloe assured his lordship that the doctor would have done such a job much better. But her younger sister assured her that now, when summer came, dozens of villagers fell ill from food poisoning every day, and only one doctor dealt with them. Damien was wiping his face after eating, and he assured that he certainly did not want to take away such a valuable resource from the people in their possession. After all, he was just a guest here, the Duke said, addressing Chloe, if she would consider it a difficulty to visit him after dinner. The eldest of the sisters was sure that it would be wiser to send for a more competent person. The owner of the mansion also thought it would be wiser to do so, and he asked the important guest for permission to send for the doctor right away. Damien told him that a few years ago, when his soldiers were staying in this castle, the sight of Lady Chloe tending to their wounds made a deep impression on him. He said that he believed that the girl would make it this time too. The Viscount was amazed and beamed with joy that the Duke remembered this. Duke Tice assured, looking at Chloe, that he had not forgotten a single detail of what had happened on these lands. A little later, our heroine walked down the corridor. She felt like a prisoner who was being led to the gallows. She carried antiseptics and instruments in her hands. Damien was flipping through a book when a girl knocked on his door. When she timidly entered, the man told her that a simple request should not inspire such horror. Lady Chloe asked the Duke to show her his wound. Tot was sitting with his feet on the bed. He replied, "Why don't you examine his wound yourself?" The girl sat down on the ottoman. He replied that in that case he should at least roll up his sleeves. Breaking away from the book, Duke Tease expressed his confidence that Chloe is capable of many things. The girl said that with all her respect, it was indecent for an unmarried woman like her to touch a man's body. Duke Damien marveled at her old-fashioned principles. The book fell to the floor. He said that perhaps she was right and began to unbutton his shirt. Soon the man threw his clothes on the floor and exposed his torso. Chloe was shocked. Damien told the girl that he knew that it might be difficult for her to resist, but he thought that it would be better if she did not look at him in such a surprised way. The face of the Vivictessa flashed with paint. She thought that she hadn't asked the Duke to take off his shirt, but soon she gathered her will and confidently treated the wound with an antiseptic. Chloe warned the man that it might hurt. He answered that he wanted her to make him suffer as much as possible. He recalled that earlier the girl said that her mentor was a doctor. The girl confirmed it. Herzog assumed that this became useful in such cases. Chloe was already holding a needle and thread in her hands. The girl said that she really learned a little about medicine from him, but this was a completely different direction than she was using now. The Duke wondered what it was. Chloe replied that embroidery was now more useful to her for applying stitches to the wound. The Duke laughed. He said that this is the first time in his life that he regards embroidery as a useful activity. Chloe agreed with his opinion. The man asked her about her younger sister. After all, she arranges secret love meetings after dark. The girl was stunned. The Viscountess asked the Duke to refrain from talking for the time being. After all, now he had to be as still as possible. But he continued to insist on answering his question. Chloe said that from that night her sister realized the wrong way. And thanks to his lordship, there were rumors of a marriage between her and Count Cormier. She expressed her gratitude to the Duke for that. The girl applied a stitch to the skin. Damien said that if he had known that his silence would reward him with 3 months of silence on her part, then he would never have shown her such mercy. Chloe told his lordship that he was very close to her. He ignored her appeal but insisted on answering his question. The girl answered, looking at the floor, that she was writing letters to him. The Duke replied that he had not received a single one. Chloe said that she could not bring herself to send them. Damien said that her pitiful attempts to lie disappointed him. The girl pushed the Duke away from her, and her heart beat faster. She asked him not to be so close to her. He asked Chloe to tell him the truth. The girl said that it was all because he hated her. Her answer surprised the Duke, but did not satisfy him. The Viscountess said that she was perfectly aware of how unbearably repulsive he found her, and that's why she didn't decide. She said that she was not sure how exactly she should repay him. Chloe apologized to the Duke. She would get up and feverishly prepare to leave him. She said that she was done with what she had come for. But something went wrong. The girl tripped carrying a tray with a dressing kit. Her supporting leg slipped and the girl began to fall on her back, overturning everything she was carrying on the floor. It was not for nothing that Duke Tease was in good physical shape. He reacted like lightning and caught Chloe by the waist. The rumble of falling instruments was still in my ears, and the girl was lying on the Duke's bed. He hovered over her, leaning on his hands. Chloe realized that she had made a mistake. She noticed that a fresh seam on the Duke's hand came apart, revealing an open wound. She was horrified. He drew attention to the seam. Tot countered that she could always sew again. The girl was noticeably nervous. She asked Damien what he really wanted from her. The man stroked her strands of hair. Then he brought them to his face and kissed them. He said that she already knows the answer to this question. Chloe said that she was here only at the request of her father. The Duke sighed reproachfully, and he asked if she really thought that this was all that her father wanted. The girl thought that they had a similar dialogue 3 years ago. The Viscountess said that she understood why he questioned people's intentions. After all, he learned not to trust others on the battlefield. However, the girl assured the Duke that his thoughts that every woman in the kingdom desperately wanted to marry him were selfish delusions. Damien laughed, and our heroine did not understand what a funny thing she said to him. The man burst out laughing. Chloe thought that he was really out of his mind. Laughing, the Duke offered to test her theory in practice. He pulled the girl by the hand, helping her to stand up. They were sitting on the edge of the bed. Demian told the girl that she can go now because she did what she came here for. Closing the door to her room behind her, Chloe regained her breath and tried to slow down her accelerated pulse. He limped to the mirror at the dressing table. She chastised herself for previously tormenting herself with the question of how she would thank such a terrible person. Chloe picked up the gloves. She thought that it would be stupid of her to give it to him. Boiling from her overwhelming emotions, she thought that she should have taken a thicker needle to stitch him up. He crumpled the gloves in his hands. She put them back on the table. Chloe told herself that she couldn't let her emotions get the better of her. After all, thanks to the Duke, Alice met Count Cormier. Our heroine went to the window and opened it wide, enjoying the evening coolness. Chloe looked at the evening starry sky. She reassured herself that when her sister Elisa gets married, their affairs will begin to adjust and everything will be fine. In the morning, there was a commotion in Verdier's mansion. Herzog Tisse once again distinguished himself with his creativity, taking people by surprise. Alice asked her sister if she was sure that the Duke had injured his arm and not his head. The Viscount nervously asked his lordship whether he had heard that correctly. Damian was drinking tea. He put the cup on the saucer, and he repeated his words, paraphrasing them a little, that the lack of the daughter of the executed Lady Alice Verdier suggests. Both girls and their father were amazed by such an unexpected and no less unexpected proposal of the Duke. Viscount was the first to overcome himself. He laughed and said that there were already negotiations about marriage between his daughter and Count Cormier. Count Tisse replied that this fact did not change his desire to offer his hand and heart to the girl. Smirking, Damian said that it seemed he wasn't good enough for Lord Verdier. Once he continues to make inappropriate comments. An eerie silence hung in the living room. Elisa nervously turned away and rubbed the hem of her dress. The owner of the estate told his lordship that this was definitely not the case. The father of the family said that regardless of his opinion, he must respect his daughter's wishes. The Duke set down the empty cup. He said that he was sure of such a need, and announced a 3-day deadline for reflection. He was getting up, about to leave the guest room. Damian adjusted the cuffs of his sleeves, and he announced that in the meantime he was going to stay at his estate nearby. He chuckled, and he expressed the hope that they would carefully consider his proposal.
Alice was lying face down on the bed. She said that she never wanted to be a duchess. The girl was crying and blowing her nose.
The younger of the sisters told the older that she perfectly understands and realizes what an opportunity this was for them. Chloe was standing next to her, trying to comfort her. She thought to herself what the Duke was thinking. And why did he make such an unexpected proposal? But then she remembered his words in order to test her theory in practice. The sister stroked the younger one on her back. The sister confidently told Alice that she did not have to agree at all if she did not want to, and she promised to talk to her father. The girl turned around and called out to her sister, but did not find anything to say to her, but simply hugged her sincerely. Elisa asked what would happen to them if something suddenly went wrong and she couldn't get married. After all, now that the Duke has made a proposal, this will put an end to relations with Cormier. The girl tried to say something else, but Chloe asked her not to cry and promised that everything would be fine with them. She assured her younger sister that some time would pass, and she would receive many proposals for marriage. She asked her not to worry and to suffer a little more. Alice's shoes were taken off and stood next to her bed. The girl timidly said that she was in love with Eddie. Chloe answered her sister that this is a man, but she stunned her with the statement that she is carrying a child from him under her heart. Alice confusedly asked her sister what she should do now. Tears flowed down the girl's face. Already late in the evening, our heroine was sitting on the bed in her room. She couldn't get the conversation with her sister out of her head. Her head hurt, and she rubbed her forehead. And in front of the girl's eyes was the confused and tearful face of her sister Elisa. Chloe thought that all this could happen due to the fact that she and her father put such an overwhelming burden on her. And this was the price for their selfishness. The girl decided that in such a case it was necessary to prevent this marriage at any cost. She decided that first she had to convince their father of this. Morning at the Verdier mansion. The Viscount was surprised by Chloe's early rise, that she had already come to him to talk about Elisa's marriage. The girl said that she had thought about it. The man said that he too was thinking about it all night. Viscount lowered his head and said that the very prospect of Elisa's marriage to a representative of the Tisse house pleased him. but at the same time worried him. The daughter asked to explain these words to her. The man said that the Tisa family was a family that valued nobility, and this meant that they would never send Elisa away, even if they found her character or behavior unpleasant. And Duke Tise certainly knew what a cruel fate awaited a divorced woman in their kingdom. Chloe put the cup on the saucer. She told her father that she had something to say. Viscount saw his daughter's indecision and was also excited. Chloe fidgeted with the hem of her dress in indecision. Unexcited Gilles burst into their room without asking. He informed Lady Chloe and Lord Verdier that Alice was missing. Surprise was on the faces of close people. The Count was the first to come to his senses. He approached the servant and asked him again why he got that. The guy held out a folded piece of paper. He said that he found it in Alice's room. The man impatiently asked to let him see, and he took the paper and began to read it fluently. Viscount read aloud, and Chloe listened, leaning on the cane of the ego. To my beloved father and dearest sister. A little later, the girl sat on the bed and reread it herself. Thanks to you, I learned that true love can overcome both illness and death. Chloe's tears dripped uncontrollably onto the paper. Because you are living proof of the power of love, and the proof itself that there is no such thing as forbidden love. Now I renounce the name of Verdier and will live like Alice. I apologize to my father. Do not forgive me for such a selfish concession. Chloe, I'm sorry. I hope that one day I will be presented with a chance to atone for my guilt. After reading, the Count staggered and fell straight to the floor. Even though I am an ungrateful daughter, please know that I am sincere when I say that I love you, with a heavy heart and 1,000 apologies. Alice. In the morning, Chloe sat by the bed of her sick father. He was still lying in bed after reading. He addressed his daughter with affectionate words, and he asked if she knew about this situation with her sister. The girl sat with a lowered gaze in front of her father. There was a photo of their entire family on the bedside table. Chloe answered that she vaguely guessed that there was a man, that Alice was not indifferent. The Viscount had a daughter, but she did not inform him, and that fact said that she did not approve of the attitude of her younger sister. And if she even found him unpleasant, then that man was an unworthy scumbag. Chloe replied that if Elisa ran away with him, despite her objections, she was sure that he must have been a worthy man. The girl put her hand on her father's hand, and she said that she trusted her sister and her choice. She promised Dad that everything would be fine, and she asked him to focus on his speedy recovery. She said that everything that concerned the Duke of Tisa, she asked to be given to her. She said, smiling to her father, that she was going to talk to him frankly and heart to heart like adult aristocratic people. When our heroine left her father, she found Gilles, and she asked the guy if he intentionally let Elisa leave. Chloe said that she understood this from the moment he brought them the letter. After all, the guy would never enter her room without permission. The servant said that he saw no point in hiding it from her. The girl said that she was grateful to him that he was next to her sister at that moment. Chloe admitted that she herself was not sure how to do it right, and now she was grateful to Gilles that he helped Alice escape. The girl was ready to put up with what happened. She said that now they had to courageously endure the misfortune that befell them. Gilles called out to Lady Chloe. Her hands were shaking. The guy expressed the hope that she would not blame herself for what happened. The young servant asked her not to think that she should take responsibility for this. The boy's hands were clenched into fists and trembling. The girl said that she does not know how to live with these people. Chloe understood that she was the only person who at this moment was capable of looking after the Verdier estate. She assured that she would definitely find a way for them all to survive. And I even agreed to make a very dangerous choice. A glass with alcohol and ice was placed on the table. Duke Tis was enjoying the sunset on the veranda of his estate. 3 days later, Lady Chloe Verdier appeared in person at the Duke of Tis's estate. Demian said that it was quite unexpected for him, and he assumed that his proposal was considered so agreeable that she decided to personally inform him about the decision. Chloe assured that it was not something that could be discussed in writing. The Duke asked if his guest was suffering from an infectious disease. The girl replied that she was not sure what he was talking about. Demian said that if this was not so, then why didn't she come closer to him? The man invited the guest to come to him and sit next to him, showing the place with the palm of his hand. Chloe stood clutching the handle of her cane. The Duke was surprised that she decided to ignore his orders. The girl took restrained steps and sat next to the Duke, making titanic efforts on herself. Demian said that the wound on his hand is not healing, The Viscountess asked if he had called a doctor about this. His answer was negative. The Duke asked Chloe if she could apply the salve to him. There was a suitcase full of vials of medicine on the floor. The girl's face had an expression that said, "You have no hands, Your Grace," Damien assured, looking at the girl that he could easily tell what she was thinking just by looking at her face. Chloe grabbed one of the bubbles, and she said that the Duke is deeply mistaken. The man took his shirt off his shoulder and exposed his arm. The Viscountess told him that the weather was too hot now, and this did not contribute to healing at all. The girl convinced him that it would be better for him to be in the room. After all, spending time outside the estate will only complicate the recovery process. Damien said that the summer in the ancestral estate of Tisei is not as pleasant as here. He assured that he liked the feeling of burnt skin from head to toe. Chloe finished applying the ointment and said that the Duke can now remove his hand. He asked her to answer why his offer was rejected. The girl replied that marriage was physically impossible for her sister now. Damien asked her to clarify what the reason was. Shutya assumed that Elisa had died. Chloe asked the Duke for permission to ask him a question before she revealed the truth. She clutched the hem of her dress, gathering herself with the strength of her spirit. The Duke commanded, "Forward." The girl asked if there was a reason why he wanted to marry her sister and Chloe herself. The water lapped the shore, creating lush foam at the edges. Damien became curious why the girl decided that way. She clarified whether his intention was to enter her family in order to completely destroy her life. The Duke snorted. Then he laughed. He asked Chloe if she remembered how she had recently told him. "It is a selfish delusion to think that every woman in the kingdom desperately wants to marry you." Damien grinned and replied that he would have said that Lady Chloe herself was self-absorbed to the point of ignorance. The girl shuddered all over. The Duke continued his thought, asking, that the girl really believed that he was marrying the daughter of an unremarkable and in-debt man was executed only to inform her, Elisa's sick sister. The Viscountess said that he was right and it was unlikely. Damien said that sometimes she is surprisingly funny, and he asked if she noticed something behind her. The girl confessed that she did not know and did not notice such a thing. And then she thought that the Duke was really in love with her sister Alice. The man laughed again. He asked if he looked like a romantic who would believe that marriage should be based on love. Chloe had only one last guess, and all this meant that there was only one explanation left why the Duke proposed to her sister. After all, there must have been some weighty reason for marrying Verdier's daughter, which the Duke could not reveal. Damien asked her to continue to reason along these lines. The girl voiced that if there were reasons why he should refuse to marry the most enviable lady of the kingdom, for the sake of a daughter from a low-status family, the Duke probably didn't care who he actually married. And this meant that he might even prefer to marry a woman with such a noticeable flaw that no one would even look at her twice. The man asked to give an example. Chloe answered that, for example, it could be a woman who was left with the ability to use one leg, and the girl was sure that if she had lost both legs, then perhaps she would have become an even more ideal bride for him than she was now. The Duke held Chloe's chin. He looked into her eyes. At some point, he kissed her. The girl clasped the hem of the dress with her hands. Damien pushed his tongue into the girl's mouth. She continued the kiss more deeply. Chloe flinched as the Duke stood up and loomed over her. The Duke broke away from her lips, catching his breath. The girl grabbed his hand. She asked what he was doing. Chloe turned away from the man. He said that she always made so many remarks that he wanted to know how sharp her tongue really could be. Damien supposed that this was a wonderful opportunity to find out if she could conceive an heir for him. The Duke continued to kiss the girl's neck and back from behind. The courtesies were interrupted by a resounding slap from the Vicomtesse. The man clearly did not expect this and was in prostration for some time, stunned. Chloe blamed his lordship for doing something similar when he hadn't even responded to her proposal yet. She thought that it was blatant disrespect. The Viscountess took a deep breath, exhaling noisily. Meanwhile, the man licked himself protectively. He said that this was a truly real resistance. Damien stood up. He said that, however, he advised the executive to reacquaint himself with the principles of conducting negotiations. The man was buttoning his shirt. Duke Damien Teese ordered the guest to step away. Chloe did not understand what effect she achieved with her visit. A few days later, our heroine was sitting in the living room of Verdier's ancestral mansion. Thoughts in her head were confused. She unconsciously touched her lips with her fingers. The girl remembered that kiss of the Duke and still felt his taste on her lips. A male voice brought the girl out of this trance. At first, it seemed to her that the Duke had called her. She shuddered. But her name was actually Gilles. He asked Lady Chloe if she was all right, because he noticed that she was too pale. The Viscountess assured the servant that everything was fine with her, and she asked what they stopped with him. Gilles said that after sending a congratulatory message on the occasion of the engagement, the royal family continued to send gifts to Lady Alice. And that's why there was still a pile of carts in the garden, filled to the brim with gifts. Gilles asked the lady for permission to ask how her negotiations with the Duke went, and whether they were successful. Chloe wondered if her guess was correct. After all, Prince Johannes is the official heir to the royal throne. But there was also a man whose power was not inferior to the royal family, and who enjoyed the respect of the people. It was the Duke of Tisa. She thought that the royal family must have been delighted by the news that the Duke, whose power had grown disproportionately, was marrying the daughter of a commoner. Instead of strengthening ties with a noblewoman from a high-ranking family, Chloe thought that the Duke of Tisa himself was well aware of this. The servant knocked and asked for permission, entered, opened the door with a report for the mistress. The guy bowed to Chloe and said that a distinguished guest had arrived. The girl asked in surprise who he was. The servant quietly told her that it was Duke Tisa himself, and he clarified with her whether he should report this to the hostess. Our heroine involuntarily shuddered. The girl answered the servant that her father was sick, and he should not have worried. She went to meet the Duke herself in the face of the hostess, and she asked the guest to wait for her in the living room. Chloe said that she wanted to clean herself up and meet the Duke later. Damien greeted the girl. He said that he already wanted her. The girl and the servant Gilles were equally surprised. The Duke asked why such emotions of surprise instead of greeting. He was pleased with himself and smiled, sitting in a carved chair. Chloe voiced his lordship that it was the height of indecency to enter the lady's empty bedroom without an invitation. He replied that he couldn't help himself because he missed her immensely. The Viscountess told the Duke that this was her personal space, and she was going to arrange for the servants to take him to the guest room. But the man took steps towards her. Damien asked in a gentle voice if it was really necessary. He played with the strands of her hair with his fingers. Gilles was surprised and simply grew closer to the floor. The Duke told Chloe that soon their relationship would pass the point where they would not need to be alone with each other. The servant was stunned. As soon as the Duke noticed the boy, he barked at him to get out and close the door behind him. Slamming the door lock, the servant Gilles endured the emotions he had experienced. His fisted hands trembled. The Duke said that these jewels were passed down from generation to generation in the house of Tissot. A box with a necklace and earrings was on the table. Damien said that if they had followed tradition, it was his mother who should have presented these jewels to her future daughter-in-law. But she did not fully approve of their union. Chloe said sadly that she understood and it was expected of her. The Duke was surprised by her reaction. He asked if she pretended to be calm, or if she really didn't care. The Viscountess looked from under her forehead at the Duke. She replied that she was simply afraid to react too hastily, because she didn't know what words would come out of his mouth the next moment. She asked Damien if his gift meant that he was accepting her offer. Toth briefly confirmed this fact. The Duke took the necklace in his hands, and he told Chloe to consider this as a proposal. The man asked the vicar, holding out his bejeweled hand to her, "Chloe Verdier, will you become my wife?" The girl bowed her head and answered that she was sincerely grateful that he accepted her offer. Damien was surprised by such a wording of the answer, and he asked how she was going to prove it to him. Chloe said that she would do everything in her power to help the Duke in every endeavor he would undertake, no matter what it was. Damien asked what she thought he might want. The girl thought for a while. The Duke asked Chloe if he had to run his tongue over her parched lips to get her to open her mouth. At these words, the girl blushed shyly. The Viscountess swallowed nervously, said that she believed that the Duke wanted power, although she said that she was short-sighted to know exactly what he was really thinking. Damien said in a commanding tone that from this moment on she was forbidden to say such things in his presence. After all, he was absolutely sure that short-sightedness was not about Chloe. The Viscountess repeated that she would do everything in her power to help the Duke, and if he wishes in the future, then he will gladly divorce him, having granted his request. The man asked in surprise that she had already offered him a divorce. He considered it impudence. The Duke said that her arrogance enraged him. The girl asked for forgiveness if her words sounded rude, and she hoped that he would not misunderstand her intentions. Damien was interested in what her intentions were, and what the girl hoped to get from him. Chloe clutched the hem of her dress, and she answered that she would like to become a duchess. The man stood up and walked towards her. Damien carefully put the ancestral necklace of the Tease family around the girl's neck. After he finished, he asked her what it was like to wear the jewels of the House of Tease around her neck. Chloe answered his lordship that they were quite heavy. The Duke assured that this was nothing compared to the burden of responsibility that she would have to bear as the Duke's wife, and he clarified whether she still wants to become his wife. Chloe answered in the affirmative. He added that she wanted this more than anything in the world. The man lifted the girl's chin with his hand and looked into her eyes. He asked how thoroughly she studied the issue of negotiations. The Duke asked her what she thought he wanted at that moment. The girl grabbed the ego by the knot of the tie, and he pulled him passionately and kissed him on the lips. The man succumbed to her temptation and enjoyed the moment of tenderness. Their kiss lasted. Sounds and languid humming spoke of the passionate desire of the body. The girl tried to restrain herself. Her posture and clenched free hands spoke of this. The tongues of the partners touched. Deep sighs burst out. The girl tried to hold the Duke by his tie, but he had already managed to break away from Chloe. He asked her if it was too much for her. The girl replied that she did not want to lie to him. The Duke said that unfortunately she would have to get used to it. After all, he was not going to stop there in the future. The Viscountess felt that she had fallen into a trap. The Viscount spoke to his dear daughter, that he had no idea that she had developed a relationship with the Duke. His lordship, holding the girl's hand, said that he expected her to become a good duchess. Lord Verdier assured, smiling, that his daughter would certainly be able to handle it, and he guaranteed it. He assured that Chloe is a sensible lady, and I was sure that she would win universal respect. The Viscount told the Duke that if he could just make his daughter happy, he would willingly offer him everything he had, including his own life. Damien's hand lay on top of the girl's hand. She saw embroidery on his glove. She wondered how he was able to find these gloves. After all, Chloe left them on the table in her room by the mirror. The Duke asked Lord Verdier if he would grant him the forest on the territory of this estate, and the mountains leading to it. Vicon was surprised by such a request. He said that the soil there was barren, and it was difficult for the trees to find use. Damien said that these lands are revered by Lady Chloe, and it just so happened that it was there that everything between them started. Chloe felt like she had become a piece on Duke Thysse's chessboard, and that he will manipulate her to his advantage as he sees fit. The priest asked the newlyweds, does he vow to always be close to his wife and fulfill his duty despite all the trials and tribulations that fate has prepared for him? Our heroine stood in a wedding dress with a bouquet of roses in front of the Duke with her head held high. He looked into the bride's eyes and pronounced the traditional words of the oath. The priest said that now the bride and groom can kiss to cement their union before God. The girl closed her eyes. The Duke leaned down and pecked her cheek. At her surprised look, he asked what she still expected from him. Damien was surprised that she expected something else from him. Disappointment was written on the bride's face. The girl's father stood in the first row of guests. He applauded and said that his dear Chloe looked beautiful. And next to him was the servant Gilles, with a confused and sad face. The priest said, by the will of the Lord God, I declare you husband and wife. Damien was silent. Chloe was a little alarmed by this because there was already some kind of idea on the face of the newly made spouse. The Duke stayed a little, took his wife in his arms. Congratulations poured in for the Duke and Duchess. The girl asked her husband to put her on the ground. He asked if she intended to drag it out even longer and gently kissed her on the cheek. Chloe reached out and wrapped her arms around the Duke's neck. Her husband praised her. People in the city speculated that the Duke had left the Verdier estate as soon as the wedding ceremony in the church had ended. They were surprised that he rushed away without even spending the wedding night with his newlywed wife. Residents asked to understand whether this meant that the Duchess would spend 3 months in the estate in complete solitude. Servant Gilles heard all this, but did not agree with it. The newspaper headlines of Red Veil were full of news from his personal life. Couldn't even marriage extinguish the ardent passion of the Duke of Tease? The recently married Duke was seen having fun with Marquise Isabella. The events took place in the tailoring shop. Our heroine learned about the active social life of her husband from the newspapers. Her face was marked with sadness. The seamstress approached the customer. She promised my lady to immediately burn all this to ashes. The girl kept saying that there was no need for that. She put the fresh newspaper aside on the table. covered it with her hand. And she said that burning paper will not turn rumors into ashes. Chloe was checking to see if the seamstress had finished taking measurements, and she was going to bow down in that case. But she assured that they still needed to discuss materials and design. The lady said that she would leave all this to her discretion, considering that she herself was not very knowledgeable in these matters. The girl was leaving. Gilles escorted her to the threshold, bowing. The bell in the door jingled melodiously, touched by the door. The servant accompanied the mistress to the carriage. He said that men and their inability to control themselves will destroy this country. He suggested that Lady Chloe temporarily entrust the management of the estate to others. The carriage moved from place. Gilles said that he could also take care of the business on her behalf. The lady assured that everything was fine. The servant said that she could attract unwanted attention because of the article in the newspaper. But Chloe assured him that if people see that she, the Duchess, allows such baseless rumors to hurt her, then when the ceremony ended, the Duke, still in his wedding light suit, sat on a horse. He told his wife that now he intends to return to the capital. Chloe silently looked into his eyes. Her husband instructed her. He gave her the order to begin the Duchess's duties now. And now, when our heroine was sitting at the window of the carriage, she thought that her husband had not answered any of her letters in the last 3 months. She remembered that photo on the front page of the newspaper, and she wondered if this could be the reason for his silence. Chloe admitted to herself that she honestly did not expect anything from this marriage, and she assured herself that there was no reason to let this affect her. Gilles looked at the lady with an unblinking gaze. He told Lady Chloe that good news awaited her upon her arrival at the mansion. To her mute question, he clarified that a letter had arrived from Lady Alice, that it was small, but it seemed that she was in full health. The girl was all beaming with joy. She asked Gilles why he didn't tell her about it earlier. The servant took on the emotions of the mistress and also felt happy with her. Chloe thought that now she knew her sister was safe, and their father's health has improved significantly. And her wedding itself also inspired people in their domains. Moreover, the girl admitted to herself that she would in any case prefer to live separately from Damien. Chloe thought, if only there was an opportunity to live forever so peacefully. The carriage rolled further down the city street, and someone had thrown a newspaper with a photo of Duke Tease on the front page, lying on the stones of the threshold. Dinner at the estate. The stars lit up the sky more and more brightly. Chloe wrote a letter to her husband. As I have already mentioned in my previous letters, thanks to your lordship, everything is fine at the Verdier estate. I hope that the case because of which you left will be settled soon. I will write to you again if something worthy of attention appears. Sincerely, Chloe Verdier. The Duke held a piece of paper with a message from his wife in his hands and reread it again. He didn't like that she signed her maiden name, because she was going to take his name. And right there on his desk lay the same newspaper with a scandalous article about the Duke and his personal life. The man turned his head in her direction. Damien assumed that his wife must have seen this article, but she didn't say a word to him. He was interested in what she felt at the same time. And did she shed tears of shame? The Duke believed that he knew her quite well, and he assumed that Chloe must have been holding back her emotions, as always. The girl did not suspect that it was her husband that annoyed her the most. The man chuckled. He flipped through the newspaper, reading the article. The secret affair of Duke Tisa during the so-called honeymoon only strengthened the position of Prince Johannes, the heir to the royal throne. Meanwhile, rumors about the deterioration of the king's health continue to spread. The Duke was pleased. The journalists wrote exactly what he told them to do. Damien mused, tapping his fingers to a rhythm on the table. He remembered his wife's words that she believed that his desire was power. He also remembered her promise to do everything in her power, to help her husband in achieving his goal and in every endeavor he undertook. Damien sighed, thought that unfortunately she was unable to help him in any way. The Duke himself admitted that whenever he thought of Chloe, he was overcome with a sudden desire to grab something. The girl asked for forgiveness, saying that she needed to go, and she expected them to give way to her walking with a cane. From the moment Damien saw her, she began to get on his nerves. It annoyed him to see her helping the needy, while she herself could easily pass for one of them, and the strange feeling at the sight of her only grew, leaving a sour taste in the mouth. The Duke looked at Chloe's embroidered gloves. He thought that next time he would have to lock her in a room and make her sew all day long. He thought that when the girl ran out of fabric, he would force her to embroider on him. The day was fine and sunny. A heavy cough was heard in the royal palace. The man hoarsely said that soon the Lord would take him to himself, and he expressed the hope to Duke Tisa that he would serve Johannes well, even after his death. The king was sure that Damien was well aware that the prince was out of his mind. He asked the duke to swear before God that he would be devoted to Johannes. Damien said, narrowing his eyes, that he promises if he becomes a king worthy of his devotion. But such an answer did not satisfy the monarch. The king angrily asserted that it was the duty of every subject to be loyal to the king. Ego was stifled by a fit of coughing. The duke calmly told the dying monarch that in such a case it was absolutely obvious what awaited their country in the future. Damien announced that the one who, imperceptibly for everyone, has become crazy will rule their kingdom. He was well aware of the weaknesses of the heir to the throne, but then he took his words back. He said that he was aware of Johannes's insanity as well as the number of people who died at his hands. Damien assured that there were many rumors coming out of the royal palace, that bloodied bodies of his victims were being dragged out one by one from the rooms of the heir to the throne. The duke assured that it would take quite a bit of time before the people found out that those words were not mere rumors. He told His Majesty that he had risked his life on the battlefield for the sake of that man. The commander claimed that he was always ready to fight for his country, and he considered it right. But it was difficult for him to accept that a madman would rule everything. The king cleared his throat. Then he menacingly asked the duke what he dared to hint at in front of him. Damien replied that now Johannes's madness is kept secret, but sooner or later everything secret will become clear. He got up from the chair next to the monarch's bed. The king angrily asked his subject since when he asked such greedy ambitions. Damien walked around the room, and turning over his shoulder he answered that it was from the moment he was born. Further events take us to the Verdier estate. Our heroine was sitting in the office and enthusiastically reading a book. At some point the girl remembered that article from the newspaper about Duke Tisse and Marquise Isabella. She presented how they have fun together. Chloe regretted not reading the article more carefully, but then she began to drive such thoughts away from herself. She told herself that she should forget about it completely. At some point the girl's father, Lord Verdier, entered. He was in a great mood. The man was holding an envelope in his hands. He solemnly announced that dear Chloe had received a letter from his lordship. The girl shuddered. It seemed to her that her father was also worried about that scandalous news from the newspaper. Taking the envelope in her hands, she thought that Damien had not written anything to her since his departure to the capital. She sat comfortably in an armchair and began to read a letter from her husband. My beloved wife, Chloe von Tisse. Wait for me at the Tisse estate, fulfilling my duchess duties there. I hope you are looking forward to our meeting as much as I am. Your husband, Damien Ernst von Tisse. The girl read to the end, swallowed nervously. Chloe stood on the threshold of her father's house, saying goodbye to her father. The Viscount spoke to Gilles, expressing the hope that he would safely accompany his daughter to the Tisse estate. The servant told my lord that there was nothing to worry about. Chloe also confirmed this, assuring her father that she was no longer a small child. The man put his hands on his daughter's hands. He told her that she and her sister Elisa would always be his little girls. Chloe jokingly asked to let her guess that he will also call her even when she becomes old. He confirmed that she was absolutely right. He said that he understood that she was now the Duke's respectable wife, and that it should have been abandoned a long time ago. The girl was also sad. Chloe threw herself into her father's arms. He hugged his child to him with all the tenderness of a father. The girl mentally said that she would like to stay with him forever, and she promised him out loud that she would be fine. She said that her father himself saw how much the Duke cherished her. Chloe thought to herself how much she didn't want to leave for the Tisse estate now. But she assured her father out loud that everything would be fine with her. The girl made a titanic effort and smiled herself, and she asked her father to let her go into married life with a smile. The train traveled along the rails, releasing clouds of steam from the pipe and announcing the surroundings with the loud sounds of the movement of its mechanisms. Our heroes were riding in one of the wagons. Gilles told Mrs. Chloe that he would be perfectly fine even in a freight car. The guy thought that this coupe was too chic for someone like him, and he looked at everything with interest, to which Chloe assured him that they had 2 whole days of travel ahead of them. And in addition, she will soon spend most of her time in complete solitude. The train drove through the mountains. Their icy peaks were covered with snow, and there were yellowed meadows below. Gilles said that it seemed to be snowing. Chloe looked out the window and saw for herself. The girl and her accompanying servant Gilles arrived at the birch castle of Tissa's house. They were already standing at his front door. A woman came out to meet Chloe. She greeted her ladyship. Then, in a mechanical voice, she introduced herself as Eliza, saying that she held the position of senior maid and manager. The girl thought that this castle was simply huge, and only one person came to meet her. It could only mean that they were not happy to be here. Chloe tapped her cane on the living room tiles. She thanked the maid for the warm welcome. The girl asked Eliza to prepare some food for her companion on the way back. She assured that the road here turned out to be quite tiring. The maid said, "Okay." The senior maid said that she would ask the maids to prepare something for her servant, and she asked the guy to follow her. Chloe turned to her servant. She expressed regret that she would not be able to conduct it personally. She thanked him and asked him to take care of himself on the way. Eliza was seeing the girl off, and she was doomed to limp after her. The guy's face expressed sadness. Eliza informed her ladyship that Lady Chloe had arrived. The woman ordered to let her in. The girl politely introduced herself by name, and she said that it was a great honor for her to finally meet her. He bowed. She thanked him for giving her a carriage and taking her from the station. The woman authoritatively asked Chloe to look at her. The girl hesitantly looked up at the lady. The mother-in-law told the girl that she was quite pretty, and Chloe thought that the Duke must have gone to his mother. The lady told her daughter-in-law that she looked like the fawn Demian caught in his youth. She asked if Chloe was hiding fantastic riches, and did she have knowledge about the skeletons in the royal closet. The lady approached Chloe, clinking her rings. The girl answered her lordship in the negative. The woman summed up what it means that her son Demian chose his bride for other reasons, different from practical ones. The mother-in-law told the girl that she was really beautiful, but she thought that hunting a deer with a damaged leg for the sake of sporting interest was rather unusual for her son. The woman said that she simply could not believe her ears. When Damien asked her for their family jewels to propose, she assumed that it could be curiosity. After all, from time to time her son got pleasure from a sharp sensation. The mother-in-law continued to examine Chloe, turning her head and lifting her by the chin. The girl smiled and endured. Our heroine decided to speak out. She assured that his lordship would not make a decision about something serious out of short-term curiosity. Chloe said that she did not know the reasons for his choice, but his mother assured him that she would serve him with all her heart, despite her own shortcomings, and do everything possible to make the Tissa house flourish. The blonde was surprised by this answer. She said that the girl turned out to be smarter than she thought. The lady said that the girl came to her liking. After all, with such a pretty face, her family jewels would suit her very well. And in addition, the girl had a good head on her shoulders. She assured that she did not expect a smaller son. After all, for him there is nothing in the world more important than family. The blonde asked how Chloe would react to the fact that when she is here, they will listen to stories about Damien's childhood. Already in the evening, Chloe got up in her room and immediately plopped down on the bed. The mother-in-law chatted with her about her son non-stop. The girl assumed that her husband had a strict upbringing, but judging by the way he was praised in front of his eyes and called, he was clearly adored in childhood. This quite tired the girl, who was just from the road anyway. Turning to her side, she saw a portrait of the Duke in a round frame. Reaching up, she put the ego down on the counter. She was surprised that Damien put his own portrait in his wife's bedroom. Chloe slept and she dreamed that the Duke was looking at her directly from the portrait. The magical light spilled over the room. The mother-in-law told the girl that she was somewhat surprised, watching how she locked herself in the office for 3 days, having arrived here very recently. She was putting a cup on a saucer. The lady said with a laugh that her daughter-in-law looked like her son Demian. After all, as soon as he began to focus on something, he could not even notice the dawn. She asked Chloe what she wanted to discuss with her. The girl hesitated a little. The girl, turning to the maid, asked if she could leave them alone for a minute. The mother-in-law replied that Eliza had been serving them since her son Demian was born. The blonde assured her daughter-in-law that Eliza was practically a member of their family, and there was no such conversation, the essence of which she was not supposed to know. Chloe remembered the lines from the letter. To my dear Duchess of the House of Tissa, how do you like life in the Birch Castle? I hope that you are fulfilling the duties of a duchess properly. I hope you won't disappoint me. Missing you immensely, Demian. The girl thought it was more like a written warning than a letter. And now Chloe announced to her mother-in-law the verdict on her study of the accounting books for 3 days. She reported that she had discovered a discrepancy in the castle's finances, and it was obvious that money was flowing through the gap. The maid trembled, and the Duke's mother assured her daughter-in-law that it was not so easy to look after a castle of this size. Chloe said that was one of the many reasons to manage him as carefully as possible. Eliza looked around fearfully. The girl said that it was not clear from the records what exactly the money was spent on, and the amount of taxes levied on the population also did not add up. The daughter-in-law reported that in addition, there was a discrepancy between the number of wine bottles in the cellar and the amount recorded in the accounting books. Chloe insisted that the records showed that this did not happen once or twice, but repeatedly and systematically. The girl noticed that such mistakes had just begun to appear when Eliza took on the role of housekeeper. The maid began to tremble at these words. The maid sniffled loudly, standing behind her mistress. She sobbed and her tears dripped onto the floor. Her whining and whining gave the Duke's mother a headache, and then she asked Eliza to leave her and her daughter-in-law alone for a minute. When the door slammed behind the maid, the mother-in-law began to reprimand Chloe. She was sure it would be wiser to discuss the matter in private. The girl apologized to her ladyship. The girl believed that it was still necessary to fire Eliza and the head groom, Robinson. The mother-in-law was surprised that there was even something wrong with him. Chloe believed that Eliza would need to use a cart to smuggle the inventory outside the castle. And with such a volume of stolen goods, it was impossible to act alone. The mother-in-law told the girl that those two were her faithful servants who supported her in difficult times, and their dismissal is not something that can be discussed so casually. The girl believed that this made their deception even more unforgivable, and if Eliza would appreciate the lady's gratitude towards her, then she would never do such things behind her back. Chloe insisted that a hole like this would only get bigger over time, and if Madame turns a blind eye to this, their actions will only get worse. The blonde chuckled. The girl assured that this would harm Tisa's house. The mother-in-law could not understand why she was so persistent, and why complicate her life with such things. And the lady still didn't understand why the girl called her Madam, as if they were strangers. And she reminded that she joined the family by getting married. Chloe was asking if she would allow her to call her mother. The blonde snorted dismissively, and she said that it seemed inappropriate to her. She suggested that they end their conversation there. The mother-in-law stood up, and when she left she said that Chloe would have to have dinner alone, saying that she had no appetite right now. The girl leaned on her cane and offered to bring the dishes to the woman's chambers, but she recalled that she had lost her appetite. Chloe said she would understand if she didn't want her company, but she believed that skipping meals was unhealthy. The mother-in-law started screaming, and she was surprised that she couldn't just keep quiet. The blonde said over her shoulder that her daughter-in-law could indeed be completely unbearable. The girl was puzzled and tense. Day gave way to evening. Our heroine was sitting alone at the table in the living room. The maid poured water into a glass. She obligingly bowed and asked to call her if she needed anything. The maid left, slamming the door. Silence hung in the room. Candles flickered in the candelabra. The food on the plate was getting cold. Chloe picked up the cutlery. She assumed that she had managed to make the local residents and workers really hate herself. A little earlier, the girl heard the servants whispering that she wanted to fire Eliza, when she herself had barely been here for a week. Another said that this is why it is so important to be careful when choosing a bride. Chloe heard all this, but did not show that it bothered her. The girl could not decide to eat. She thought that everything had become so tasteless. She suddenly wondered if everything was okay with her father. She hoped that Gilles returned safe and sound. She also assumed that Alice could write to her again. She was also worried about when the Duke would return. Chloe wondered if everything would be better than now when her husband arrived. She remembered his phrase, "Fulfill your duties like a duchess." The girl shook her head, trying to understand what he wanted from her. She drove away bad thoughts from herself, but it seemed to her as if driving people into corners was in the tradition of the Tease house. The girl stuck her fork into the meat. Chloe was talking to herself, that she doesn't know who was worse, the mother or the son. Suddenly, a male voice said that it seemed his wife was having a pleasant conversation. Chloe was extremely surprised, and Damien was already leaning over her shoulder. He said it was so unlike her to talk to herself. The Duke said that he probably created a feeling of loneliness in her heart during his absence. Chloe stood up from her chair, leaning on her cane. She greeted his lordship shyly. Then the mother-in-law's voice was heard. "Damien, my dear son, The blonde ran to meet the Duke, holding the hem of her dress. The woman said that she must be sleeping, and she reproached her son for not warning him about his arrival in advance. The Duke replied that he returned earlier because he missed her, his mother. Mother told Demian that he was just lovely. She caressed her son's cheek, assuming that the road took a lot of strength from him, that this is why his face became so thin. The Duke said that he drank all the alcohol that was offered in the first-class carriage, and he said that rushing here, he got pretty hungry. I thought it would be nice to satisfy my hunger. His mother, giggling sweetly, replied that she would immediately order Madame Dutton to cook something. Damien believed that this was not necessary. After all, the table was already set enough. There was broth and a cold meat steak on the table. Chloe shuddered involuntarily. The Duke asked for additional table settings to be prepared. His mother made a face. Very soon the table was prepared by the servants for 3 people. The dishes clanged. The Duke family sat down. The maid served the master. Damien asked if Chloe had liked everything in his absence. She answered in the affirmative. The husband was surprised and asked her again. The girl said that everyone was so kind to her, and they made her stay here incredibly enjoyable. The Duke said that he was glad to hear this. He was just cutting off a piece of steak with a knife. The first piece of meat was put into the mouth, and after chewing it a little, the Duke vomited. There was a noise at the table. The mother was worried about her son. The man wiped his face, swearing. Chloe was shocked and worried about her husband's health, and he continued to spit. He threateningly ordered to call a doctor immediately. His face was gloomy and did not bode well. The mother wondered why Demian needed a doctor. He replied that being the main doctor of this family, he could not take care of his mother's health, and now he intends to execute him immediately. The woman insisted that she was fine. The Duke replied that the fact that his mother tasted such unpleasant food without a single complaint made him think that there was something wrong with her sense of taste. The blonde assured Demian that there was nothing wrong with her taste, and that the doctor is not to blame. She asked me to forget about the punishment, waving my hand. The man asked if his mother was sure. He found the steak absurdly tough and the vegetables limp and dry, and the soup, in his opinion, was prepared several days earlier. He also believed that the wine was not suitable for serving on the table of Tisa's house, and he was surprised that Mother knew about this and was silent. The Duke ordered the chef to be brought to him in this case, and in a rage he grabbed the table knife tighter. Soon the kitchen workers were invited to the table. They looked guilty. Demian said that he simply did not understand how the scraps intended for the almshouse ended up on his family's table. The workers clenched their teeth and whispered. The Duke said that it seemed that those who were tasked with setting the table had apparently made some mistake. The servants swallowed nervously. Falling on their knees before the master, they said that they had committed a terrible sin. They asked his lordship to forgive them. Demian was surprised that they still hoped to survive after such an insult to his family. He mockingly ordered that the kitchen workers be thrown into prison, and each one torn to pieces. But then Chloe spoke up. She asked his lordship to spare the servants, and she assured that it was just one meal. She convincingly and persistently asked her husband to forgive them for this small offense. Demian told his wife that this food on his table was intended for the almshouse, but she assured that it was still suitable for consumption. The Duke replied that he had more than expressly instructed her to perform her duties as Duchess in this house, and he was amazed that Chloe did not understand the meaning of his words. The servant trembled while on his knees. The man looked sideways at his wife and said there should be common sense in everything. The girl asked for forgiveness for her negligence. But how is his wife and lady to her? It was an insult to his name to sit here, eating such inedible scraps without a single complaint. He told Chloe that perhaps she was their humble, noble family. Of this house, she asked the Duke to restrain himself, showing mercy to the servants. The girl demanded that her husband give them the opportunity to treat her to an official dinner befitting the Tease household. The evening stars were shining over the Duke's estate, and in its windows there was a soft light. Chloe put pumps on her feet. She thought that by luck she managed to save the lives of the servants. The girl remembered how her husband answered her request, that he believed that he should have mercy, since this was what his chosen one wanted. He said that Chloe truly was all generosity. The girl was lying tired on the bed. She thought it had been a very long day, and she was very glad that she did not have to see the servants' heads flying, otherwise she would have vomited. A maid knocked on Chloe's door. She informed my lady that his lordship wished to see her in his chambers. The girl thought to herself, swearing what her husband could need from her at such a late hour. She stood up. and she told the maid to tell her that she would come as soon as she was ready. A man's voice asked in surprise what preparations she might need. The man came closer to his wife. The maid bowed her head. Demian assured the girl that there was no need for etiquette or proper dress. She shyly covered herself with the blanket. The man said that it was unnecessary at this hour of the night, recalling that she was his wife. The Duke waited. Chloe replied that she would meet him in his chambers as soon as she got dressed. Therefore, she asked me to give her a couple of minutes for this. Demian chuckled, and he recalled that he had already said that there was no need to observe etiquette. He told her to come like that. Chloe frowned. She had nothing to say to her husband. She swung her foot off the bed, getting ready to put on her shoes, and then she leaned on her cane. The man was surprised that she could not get out of bed without the support of a cane. He held her by her clothes. She replied that it was hard for her, and she could easily fall and end up on the floor. Chloe was pulling the blanket over her shoulders. She asked if this was what her husband wanted to see. The Duke replied that it would be charming. Demina extended his hand and asked his wife if they could now go to his room. The fire crackled in the fireplace. The girl was sitting on the sofa opposite her husband. She said it was already quite late, and if Demian had some important matter, she was ready to help him. The Duke asked Chloe what she thought. What kind of things can happen between wife and husband at such an hour? The girl wondered if he could be hinting at her. But then she remembered that this didn't happen even on their wedding day. But she began to drive these thoughts away, pulling the cape tighter over her shoulders. Chloe turned to her husband. He chuckled contentedly. He could easily tell what his wife was thinking about now. Demian said that he was ready to reward his wife for conscientiously fulfilling her duties as a duchess. She replied that she did not think she had done anything useful. The Duke claimed that she successfully got rid of Eliza and Robinson for him. Chloe was surprised that her husband knew about their lies, to which he replied that he loved his mother, and he knows how attached she was to those two. Therefore, he turned a blind eye to their misdeeds. The girl widened her mouth in surprise. Demian asked why his wife made such a face. He was surprised that the fact that he loved his mother could be so shocking. The man got up from the sofa. He said that even though his mother could be capricious and immature, but she was the one who gave him life. Demian reported that his mother would go to spend time at their villa in the south at the moment. After all, she was heartbroken over Ellie and Robbie being fired. The Duke believed that she would benefit from a change of scenery and some fresh air. He picked it up and knocked the boxes down on the table. He said that this should help him adjust to life here. Our heroine wondered what it could be. She doubted that her husband could show her kindness. 2 boxes stood on the table tied with a gift blue satin ribbon. The Duke asked his wife to open it. Chloe lifted the lid and froze. The Duke said that he thought he could give her something more practical than a cane, which she seemed to have a habit of losing. The box contained a prosthesis. Demian, smiling, assured that as soon as his wife got used to him, she would be able to walk comfortably without support. He asked Chloe to try it on so he could see. The girl squinted her eyes and closed the box. She thanked her husband for the gift, but she assured that using it would be at the discretion of the recipient. Chloe said she would try it on some other time, and I thought that I didn't know how to use it. The girl didn't want her husband to see her hobbling around. It was obvious that he intended to mock her. She wondered what her husband allowed himself to do. Demian summed up her sentence, and he was surprised that she allowed herself to consider the invitation of her servant to the compartment also at her own discretion. Chloe was extremely shocked. The girl asked in surprise why he sent someone to follow them. The Duke assured that when he is a member of the House of Tees, he hears all kinds of news regardless of his own desire. The husband asked for what purpose she showed the guy generosity that far exceeded what a servant deserved. He angrily asked his wife why she had brought the servant to this estate. Demian remembered his wife's story about Gilles, that he was a faithful servant who had worked for the family since he was still a child. But he also stated that Eliza nursed him instead of his mother when he was a baby. And yet she betrayed their trust. Chloe sat opposite the Duke and there was a chill about him. She literally felt him physically. The girl looked at the Duke and immediately lowered her eyes. She asked him to stop insulting her. Demian replied that he did not at all intend to insult her, but was giving advice. He assured that her faithful servant had not left the Tees railway station. And if people find out that he stayed here because of some long-standing attachment to the hostess, then what will they think? The Duke assured that then they would start whispering behind her back. Chloe wondered why Gilles had not returned to the Verdier estate. The man spoke to Chloe Von Teese as he loomed over her. that he doesn't believe that she abandoned her duties as a duchess and disgraced him. The girl involuntarily shuddered. He changed the subject and again suggested that she try on the prosthesis immediately. The girl clenched her fists. Chloe sat down on her side. Noisy breathing escaped from her chest. The Duke knelt down next to his wife. He asked her which part was uncomfortable for her. The man reached out and grabbed her dress, exposing her left thigh. Chloe grabbed his hand. She demanded not to touch her. Damien asked to answer him. After all, he had to know the shortcomings of the prosthesis in order to correct them. The girl blurted out that the whole device was uncomfortable, because she didn't need it and it hurt. The Duke said that as soon as she gets used to it, then the desired effect will occur. But he warned that it would take time and effort. He helped his wife get up, supporting her. The man stroked his wife's cheek and asked why she was crying. Chloe turned away, and she said that she had no reason to cry. The Duke smiled slightly. He slid the dress off her hip, and he said that crying like a child is not appropriate for a duchess. The man adjusted the device on his wife's leg while caressing her. She told his lordship that he really looked like the devil. Damien insisted that he had yet to show her what a devil he could be, and he leaned over her, hanging over her and holding her chin, bringing his face closer to her. He asked Chloe what she was feeling right now. The girl replied that she was offended, but he didn't believe her. The husband slid his hand along her thigh. The girl's heart jumped out. She said she was deeply upset. The Duke asked to be allowed to ask her again how she felt. He leaned even closer, bringing his torso closer to her chest. The pulsation accelerated. Chloe tugged at the hem of her dress and squeezed it with pent-up emotions. She said her heart was beating painfully fast. Damien asked if it was that her whole body became hot, as if coals were burning inside her. His fingers slipped under the hoop of the device. The man was surprised that her blood could boil so much that she was not able to control her breathing, and her heart was about to jump out of her chest. The pulsation went off scale in the body of our heroine. She couldn't control it. She replied that that was why she felt so offended. Damien brought his face closer and opened his lips for a kiss. The wife froze. His hand touched the woman's bare thigh. Their tongues met. The ringing sound and languid moans could not be contained by any of them. Having pulled away, each of the partners was already out of breath. The Duke asked his wife to tell him what it was like to kiss a man whom she compared to the devil himself. He gently caressed her cheek. Chloe asked permission to return to her chambers. The Duke said that he would refuse her this courtesy if that was all she wanted. The girl only exhaled noisily in response. The man had heard that a railway would soon be built to the Verdier estate, and then apparently this place will develop at lightning speed. He clarified with his lordship whether this was his wedding gift to his wife. Damien asked if he thought this was a problem. The man chuckled and denied it, and he said that he was surprised that the Duke turned out to be such a devoted husband. Chloe found it a little tedious. She ate the soup in silence, her eyes lowered to her plate. The guest put the empty glass on the table. He said that recently there had been suspicious movements in the Carter Duchy, that they declared that the war was over, but they could not be sure when they could escape with a knife in the back. The man insisted that Cartier could strike at any moment, using their geographical location to their advantage, and he believed that his lordship should strike them first. And he believed that perhaps soon the Duke of Tisa would have to make a decision. Damien was deep in thought. His face was tense, and his chin was supported by his hand. After a pause, he squinted his eyes to the left, and he said he wanted to know what his wife thought about it. Chloe winced, spoon in hand. All the men stared at her intently. The girl said that she was just a layman when it came to politics and diplomacy. The guy said that a noblewoman like her from a good family wouldn't have to worry about such things. Chloe continued her thought. What she knew, however, was that the people of Swanton were already tired of the war. The Duke said that this was the case, but he asked whether the conquests of the duchy did not ultimately benefit their people. Chloe said that no one could guarantee victory in the war, and they could not assume that Carter's military forces were still weak. The girl said that, as Count Weiss had already noted, the dukedom of Carter was quite capable of taking advantage of its geographical position. The guy laughed, saying that it was a surprise for him. After all, the Duchess's horizons turned out to be quite broad. The girl answered Mr. Weiss that he was too generous. Damien clarified whether his wife believed that they should just sit while Carter builds up his strength. He recalled that they had already begun to increase duties on goods delivered from Swanton, and the Duke wanted to know Chloe's opinion on this matter. The men at the table muttered and whispered, not taking their eyes off the girl. There were also those who grinned, considering it a kind of joke. Our heroine clutched the hem of her dress, and she thought that the Duke was trying to humiliate her in front of these men. And if that was the case, she refused to just put up with it. Chloe voiced that the ideal solution would be to sign a peace treaty. She believed that bloodshed had to be avoided at all costs, especially when there is an opportunity for diplomacy. Mr. Weiss said this was nothing more than naive optimism. After all, promises were broken much more often than they were kept. The girl assured that there was a way to guarantee compliance with the agreement. The man asked why Chloe thought that. The girl said that the kingdom valued blood ties. She said there are many approaches, but the most effective was marriage. Demian said that the fictitious marriage was a classic arrangement, and he agreed that it would be effective. But he recalled that the dukedom has only one heir, and the Swanton royal family did not produce a single princess. Chloe said that Swanton's heir is Johannes, while the heir to the dukedom, Carter, had 3 older sisters who were not yet married. The men couldn't help but chuckle, snort, and cheer. The men began to repeat, "Johannes, Johannes." Chloe couldn't understand what was happening. It seemed to her that they were mocking her very skillfully. Mr. Weiss cleared his throat and spoke. That being married to a prince was too terrible to even imagine. He assumed that her ladyship was not following the red veil. Chloe saw that scandalous article on the front page of the newspaper before her eyes. The man laughing said that if she reads the article about the prince, another man pulled him back. He wondered what could have prompted him to raise the topic of the red veil. He reminded the gentleman about manners. Demian said that he himself was curious. Has his wife ever read the red veil? The Duke slyly narrowed his eyes and said that judging by his wife's reaction, he was right. Chloe confirmed that she had read it, but she insisted that it was only once, and she did not attach much importance to what she read in it, since it was just a cheap newspaper. The girl stood up and said that she would go and ask for dessert, and she asked the gentlemen to continue their discussion. When Chloe left, men began to admire her. Mr. Weiss said that she was truly a wonderful woman, and he understands why his lordship was in such a hurry with this marriage. The interlocutor replied that if he fell in love with the wife of his former boss, he would be in big trouble. The man insisted that he was not interested in her romantically. Mr. Weiss insisted that he felt nothing but respect for Chloe. The girl limped out of the room. Our heroine sighed heavily. She thought that the men at the table really were the worst. It was already the dead of night. The doors of the Teese estate were persistently pounded. A light came on in one of the rooms. Chloe walked to the door. The sound did not stop. A woman's voice called, "Milady." The girl was dressed only in a nightdress. She opened the front door with a creak. An obscene curse of indignation was ready to escape from her lips. A woman's hand grabbed Chloe's shoulder. She was startled and jumped back in fear. Chloe asked the woman what she was doing here. The guest only breathed noisily, unable to say anything. Her face was twisted into a grimace. It was Eliza, their former housekeeper. The woman was wearing a cloak with a hood. Her face expressed sorrow. Chloe admitted to the former maid that she was fired for systematic misconduct. The woman was still panting from her fast run. The estate maid was in a hurry to join her mistress. She almost ran towards her. The girl pulled her hand. She said she shouldn't have been seen here, and she assured that if his lordship found out, it could be very bad for everyone. But the woman demanded that she let her go. Eliza reminded her how many years she had worked here. She insisted that she had dedicated her entire life to serving this family. Chloe felt sorry for her. The Duchess asked the woman to calm down, and she demanded that she tell her why she was there. She shuddered, and she began to say something confusedly. Eliza said her grandson had a fever and lost consciousness, that he even began to rave. The woman asked permission from her ladyship to see the family doctor. Chloe thought the boy might have the same disease she suffered as a child. She remembered that pain and how she called her mother for help. The Duchess ordered the maid to immediately bring a doctor. The girl answered in amazement that she could not do this without the owner's permission. Chloe was surprised that she intended to disturb his lordship's sleep at such a late time of day. She also reminded that she was the mistress of this castle. The maid trembled at that commanding tone. She replied that she would immediately go for a doctor, and she quickly left on errand. The Duchess asked the woman to put her on her back and carry her into the house. Eliza asked again in surprise. Chloe insisted that the fight against fever was a proactive war. She soon threw a warm cape over her shoulders, tying it as she went. She asked me to hurry up. All the windows in the small house were on fire. The woman asked the Duchess what she was doing with her grandson. Chloe opened the blanket and removed all of the boy's clothes. The child was shaking all over with chills and said that he was cold. Eliza screamed at Chloe. She demanded to listen to her grandson's complaints, and I was afraid that he would freeze to death. The Duchess asked the woman to go out and quickly bring her some snow. In this way, the girl was going to cool down the heat. She opened the bottle of medicine. Eliza said in a threatening tone that if something happened to her grandson, she would never forgive her for it. Chloe said that later she could be offended by her as much as she wanted. And now, if a woman did not want to see her grandson with a limp like Chloe herself, then she had to completely trust her. The boxes with bottles were all slightly open and in disarray. There was also a cloth for a compress. The man said that her ladyship did an amazing job and treated the child. The boy already looked better and was fast asleep. The doctor said that if the Duchess had come a little later, there might have been no chance of a cure. He told Eliza that she should be grateful to her. The woman was crying, sobbing. He asked her ladyship how she could repay her. Chloe told her that she did not save the child's life in order to leave someone in debt. The girl said that she was sincerely glad that everything was fine with the boy now, and there was no longer any danger to his health. Suddenly the door creaked. A man's voice called out to Chloe. The Duke of Tees stood in the doorway in a warm cape with fur. Eliza caught herself and began to stutter out of fear. The doctor was also caught red-handed, and only Chloe remained restrained. Demian ordered, "Get out!" The couple, the Duke and his wife, walked crunching through the fresh snow. She said that Eliza was supposed to leave 2 days ago, but the former housekeeper was unable to do this due to her grandson's illness, and all the money she pocketed from the castle was squandered by her son. He went to Svan and lost in gambling. Chloe assured her husband that the boy was not to blame for anything, that it was the adults who sinned. The girl said that paying tribute to the fact that Eliza devoted her entire life to serving the Tees house, she was practically a member of the family. Damian looked at his wife but still remained indifferent after that. Chloe said that she called the doctor without her husband's permission because she did not want to disturb his sleep, and she apologized to him. The Duke told her that he never asked her to report. He assured her that she did not need to justify her actions or apologize for them. Damian said that all he wanted to know was why she decided to help Eliza. He said that he was informed that his wife even wrote their former housekeeper a letter of recommendation. Chloe said she thought the woman needed help, but having worked at Birch Castle all her life, Eliza could not get good recommendations anywhere except here. She said that regarding her decision to call a doctor, the situation was so urgent that she could not afford to waste time. Demian assumed that his wife simply wanted to relieve herself of the burden of guilt due to the dismissal of that woman. The girl denied the truth of this husband's assumption. He guessed that it was pity for Eliza that her son had lost all her money, but Chloe denied this too. Damian assumed it was all out of deep compassion for the servants. The girl turned to his lordship. Can he always give a clear explanation for his actions? The Duke raised his head to the stars, pretending to be thinking, and after a short pause he replied that he always could. Chloe said with disappointment that she was different from him in this. The girl said that she could not understand why her husband asked her such questions so persistently. He answered her question with a question, wondering what she did when she wanted to get to know someone better. Chloe answered with her eyes downcast, that she just got to know them naturally. She was sure that when she calmly observed a person, there were things that could be learned about him without resorting to questioning and interrogation. Damian saw that his wife had her hands on the handle of the cane, and both were red and inactive. Deciding that Chloe was cold, he quickly took off his cloak and threw it on her. The Duke told her that he was thinking of giving her another gift. He said he was considering hiring Gilles Watteau to fill the currently vacant position of head groom. The Duke knew that he lived from hand to mouth as a day laborer at the railway station. The guy worked as a laborer here instead of returning to the Verdier estate, and he believed that his proposal would be most appropriate. Demian asked his wife if she wanted to keep the servant Gilles closer to her. The girl's eyes sparkled. She assured that he was a trustworthy young man, and she vouched for him with her life. Chloe swore that nothing inappropriate happened between them. The Duke grinned. He said that now, if it was as she said, then she should have kissed him. The girl asked to forgive her for the misunderstanding. Demian asked to prove to him that her relationship with that servant was pure as snow. In this case, he said that he would be happy to hire him. Chloe said that she had no desire to kiss his lordship. The man was sorry, and he said that apparently that poor boy would soon be on a train heading away. The wife replied that Gilles was free to choose where to live himself. Demian claimed that he was a devoted husband, And he said that the less confidence his wife instilled in him, the fewer places there would be where he would be welcome. He insisted that in this kingdom the power of the Duke took precedence over the freedom of the servant. Chloe said sullenly that it was unfortunate for the kingdom. The girl asked her husband to lower his head. The Duke replied, "As you wish," and leaned over her. Chloe tugged at her husband's camisole, pulling him down with force. The man was amazed at this treatment. Still holding the Duke tightly, the girl rewarded him with a passionate kiss. After that, Damien grinned contentedly. He hugged and squeezed his wife in his arms. Leaning over, he told her not to try to run away from him. Chloe flinched at her husband's harsh tone. The Duchess again pulled her husband's clothes and, standing on her tiptoes, gave him a loud peck on the lips. Duke Tease was satisfied and pleased. He told his wife that her efforts were worthy of praise. And that warmth of the lips. The man said that the fact that the hottest kiss she gave that day was for the sake of another man. The Duke insisted that this made him feel both extreme pleasure and extreme insult. Our heroine was sitting at the table and writing a letter. "To my beloved father, Lord Verdier. Please forgive me for such a long absence of letters from my side. I've been extremely busy lately. It's so cold here that the river has frozen over. Although I barely had time to notice it, the servants of the Birch Castle are extremely courteous and hospitable. The Duke, who is both patron and master of the castle, did everything possible to help me adapt to life here." Chloe stopped writing. She decided to reread the letter again. The thought struck her that writing lies was not so easy. "There is one more piece of news that may surprise you." The girl looked dreamily out the window. "During our last correspondence, you mentioned that you were upset by Gilles's unexpected decision to leave his position at Verdier Castle. It seems that he was completely fascinated by the Tease estate, which he visited for such a short time. His lordship offered Gilles an excellent position in the Birch Castle." Chloe, smiling, looked out of the window at her faithful servant. "I dare to believe that this was done as a sign of attention to me." Gilles bowed to his lady. "As you can tell, I am treated with the utmost generosity and respect, so you have nothing to worry about. I wish you to remain in good health until my next letter. I miss you from the bottom of my heart. Chloe Verdier, daughter of Thomas Verdier." Having finished writing, the girl limped off with the envelope to send the message. The ball rolled across the green surface of the pool table, making pants. The next blow was made by Effie, and the balls began to rotate after the blow was struck. The Duke praised himself for the brilliant blows he made today. Chloe looked disappointed. Damien boasted that at this rate he would soon have 100 points. The girl reproached her husband for playing against the rules, and I just lost a point myself. The man recalled that his wife had previously told him that she did not know the rules of the game at all, and if she lied to him so as not to play with him, then he would be disappointed. The girl asked why he called her in the middle of the night. She said that if he intended to make sure that she was fulfilling her duties, he would not find any problems. Chloe claimed that her relationship with the servants had also improved. The Duke ordered his wife to take the cue. She opened her eyes in surprise. Damien persistently handed his cue to his wife, and she was surprised that he wanted to compete with her. He assured that she understood everything correctly. The girl clarified the rules of this game. She also insisted that a game without bets, where nothing was at stake, was of no interest to her. Damien answered his wife that she never ceased to amaze him, and he asked what she would like as a bet in this game. Chloe was preparing her cue. She said that if she wins, her husband should stop calling her to his chambers so late at night. The Duke asked what would happen if he won the game against her. The girl froze. Damien was surprised that she did not even imagine that she might lose the game to her husband, and he considered it reckless. The Duke said that if he wins the game, he will take from her what he wants. The man prepared to make the first blow. Chloe agreed to these conditions. She said that if her husband wins, she will take whatever he wants from her. Hitting the ball with a cue made a peculiar sound. The balls on the table rolled in different directions. Chloe was angry, and the Duke leaned over and told her that it was fall. The girl said that this could not happen. Damien thought it was a shame, and he said that it was all an optical illusion. The girl bit her lip and thought that she could not trust this man. The Duchess took a stance and prepared for the blow. From the outside, she looked more than sexy. Damien thought that he knew that she was an amazing woman in many ways, but he was surprised and delighted with his wife that she again exceeded all his expectations. Damien licked his lips predatorily, experiencing sexual attraction. The Duke asked if Chloe knew that the point of the game was to trick the opponent into making a mistake. The girl, preparing for the blow, replied that she had heard about it. The fire burned brightly in the fireplace. Demian informed his wife that in 2 days a number of high-ranking guests would arrive on a visit to the Birch Castle. He loomed over his wife, and he said that he hoped that she, as a duchess, would do everything in her power to give them a warm welcome. Demian, as if accidentally remembering, said that there was one more detail. He said that the Marchioness Isabella would also be among those present. The Duke said that she was quite an enterprising lady, and he advised Chloe to be extremely attentive to the preparations. The girl's cue was unsuccessful. The ball, without moving any of the others, rolled into the pocket. Chloe froze in place. She was amazed by the situation. Demian couldn't help but chuckle. He told his dear wife that apparently she had lost this game. But the girl was now worried about something else. She was analyzing the information she had just received about the reception of guests. She was overwhelmed with emotion. Chloe wondered what her husband was thinking when he invited Marquise Isabella to the reception. She didn't understand what her husband was even thinking about. The man told his wife that now it was her turn to give him what he wanted. She asked what it could be. The Duke said he wanted her lips. He began to wrap a strand of her hair around his finger. Chloe asked if his desire was sincere. He said that he had never been so sincere in his life. Demian chuckled in surprise. He recalled that his wife herself suggested making a bet. The Duke thought that he would like to see Chloe broken, so that those feelings that she suppressed in herself would be released and flare up before his eyes. The girl turned to his lordship and looked at him in confusion. Her eyes were wet and sparkling. She told her husband that she had never felt such contempt for another person. Demian kissed the girl. He said that it was a great honor for him. He asked if that was all she wanted to tell him. Chloe insisted there was something else. The Duke asked her to continue, and he assured her that he was listening to her carefully. He wanted Chloe to yell at him, and she asked how he dared insult her like that. Demian wanted the girl not to hold back, but to show him what was inside her. Chloe clutched the hem of her dress, but she soon let him go. She said that if he had no further instructions, could she now leave him? The Duke frowned, and without waiting for an answer, she left her husband's bedroom, loudly slamming the door. Demian was a little taken aback, and he told himself that he seemed to have underestimated his wife, as well as her ability to drive him crazy. Chloe, meanwhile, was hurrying down the corridor to her room. A couple of days later it snowed, and the firs of the estate were covered with his white caps. Chloe, surrounded by noble ladies, sat on the sofa in the living room. She thanked them for coming all the way here at her invitation. The Duchess expressed the hope that their stay here would be comfortable. The ladies whispered to each other. Chloe said, "Welcome," expressing respect and hospitality to the ladies she was seeing for the first time in her life. The girl noticed that one of them was looking askance at her, and she turned to that one. Marquise Isabella thanked, and she insisted that she was worried that her presence here might upset the mistress of the house. Chloe said that she knew that the guest was a close friend of his lordship, and she said that she didn't understand why she should suddenly be upset. The maid of honor shuddered. The Marchioness replied that it was not her wish to attend an event at which she would feel so bad. Another guest nearby asked if she was okay. Isabella asked for forgiveness. She sniffled and said that she understood very well that the world was actually very cruel. Chloe took a deep breath, trying to control her feelings and emotions. The Marchioness wondered if her suffering could really equal the feelings of a woman who was forced to show hospitality to her husband's theoretical, rumored mistress. Chloe said that if the Marquise feels discomfort, then she is ready to prepare a room where she can relax with all the amenities. And she asked if she wanted to go back to the castle and rest. Isabella made faces and said that she thought that she would not be welcome here. And covering her face, she screamed that she knew that she would not be a welcome person here. Chloe apologized and assured the Marquise that she did not mean it at all. The ladies whispered angrily to each other. Then the Duke approached the girl from behind. He asked what happened here. His wife began to explain to him, stuttering a little. She said that the Marquise was not feeling well, and so she invited her to return to the castle. Lady Isabella said in an offended tone that she knew she shouldn't have come here. She turned to the side and said that it was her own fault for coming here. After all, I was aware of how widows and divorced people are treated in this country. The woman sitting next to me began to make fun of her, that she couldn't believe that there would be at least one living soul who would believe it. After all, it was not the Marquise's fault that her husband died. Another said that street gatherings in the middle of winter would have been very difficult for the one who came from Svan. She said that if she thought like that, then she also began to feel something unwell. She asked if there was anything unusual in the food. The third complained that her tea was completely cold. Chloe felt through her skin that these ladies were filled with hostility towards her, and she understood perfectly well that they would prefer not to accept the fact that the incompetent daughter of a penniless count had become a duchess. The Duke informed Mrs. Isabella that he would go and arrange for a carriage to be prepared for her. The lady said that she did not want to spoil the event by her presence. Chloe looked at her guest in surprise. The Duchess interrupted her speech. She said that if she had felt awkward about her, she wouldn't have sent her the invitation in the first place. Demian, next to his wife, supported her words with a silent nod. Chloe said that if her guest was feeling better, she hoped she would honor them with her company. The girl said that if the Marquise was still unwell, then she was of course free to go and rest. She insisted that this was all she wanted to tell her. The lady hesitated for a moment. Chloe said that the same applied to the rest of her and her husband's guests. The blonde insisted that she was simply too worried, since she had never been to such large meetings before. The Duchess asked Madame Isabella what she wanted so much, but the guest assured that she was already feeling better, and she asked for forgiveness for disturbing me. Chloe stood up and thanked everyone for their understanding. She said that they would soon be serving pudding, which was chosen to everyone's taste. She expressed the hope that everyone would enjoy the pleasure. Demian told his wife that this was the Marquise Isabella's favorite dish, and he assured her that it was so thoughtful of her. He thanked Chloe for her hospitality. The Duchess sighed languidly and looked over her shoulder as she answered her husband that she is always happy to please his guests. Chloe walked away with dignity. The Duke looked after his wife with pride. Marquise Isabella was ready to cry. She covered her face with her hands. It was a surprise for her, and now she understood that the Duke's wife would not be trifled with. The lady was telling her friend, "What if you think about it, it was the Marquise who met his lordship first," and she believed that she had every reason to feel as if she had been taken away from her, what should have been hers by right. The guests' feet were wearing skates. She thought it was absurd to expect them to skate in such cold weather. She said that they were leaving tomorrow, and they just had to endure it until then. Marquise Isabella sat rubbing her knee. Another lady said that she would never have come here in her life if it weren't for her husband's business. The maid of honor analyzed what she had heard from the ladies. She glared villainously around. Meanwhile, Demian was sledding his wife. Chloe was relaxed and detached from everything going on around her. The Queen's maid of honor could not calm down. She considered the proposal to be baseless, and she had no intention of depriving herself of anything. The ladies glided across the ice with ease, twirled and giggled cheerfully among themselves. The Duke told his wife that the weather was simply beautiful today. She agreed with him. Demian asked his wife if she liked the hidden hostility between the ladies. The girl replied that thanks to him, everything went flawlessly. The Duke said that he did not think that Chloe could allow herself to be played so easily, but she still exceeded his expectations. The Duchess reproached her husband for having fun with this increasingly deplorable situation. The man replied that he saw no obstacles to this. The ladies skated on the ice, supporting each other. Chloe was sure that if she allowed herself to show disrespect in front of the servants, then she would irrevocably lose her authority as a duchess. She assured that if something like this happened, and she knew this very well, that it would lead to negative consequences both for the Duke himself and for the entire Tease house. Chloe said that was why she had no right to remain indifferent. The girl said that she was only fulfilling her duty as a duchess, which her husband so often likes to mention at every opportunity. Demian asked his wife if she was offended by him. The girl shuddered, and she replied that even if this was true, she was not stupid enough to admit it out loud. The Duke asked in surprise why she was secretive. Chloe replied that from now on her life was in his hands. The girl insisted that she had no desire to be thrown out in the middle of a frozen lake because of the insult caused to him. Demian snorted contentedly. He assured the girl that there was no one who amused him as much as his beloved and dear wife. Chloe gave the Duke a withering look, but chose to ignore his taunt. The Duke said that he did not want to leave his wife for a long time, so he asked to hurry up. The man agreed, and he said that he only wanted to say that if his wife showed her ladyship any disrespect, then he would like to apologize to them. The Duke tapped his fingers nervously, and he looked at his wife sitting alone on a sleigh in the middle of a pond. Demian turned his gaze to his interlocutor. He was surprised that he wanted to see him just for this. The man, shuddering, apologized once again to his lordship. Other ladies rode next to the Duchess, and her husband wondered what she was thinking about now. Demian mentally asked his wife what was going on in her head right now, and he did not know whether this would quench his painful thirst. The Duke would like to know how Chloe imagined the world around her. He wanted to explore her down to her fingertips. The husband wanted to understand how her inner world worked, and he wanted to be the only man in her eyes. He could not understand his desire, and he assumed that he himself longed for the love of this amazing woman. This own guess seemed to puzzle him. It turned out that he wanted the love of Chloe Verdier. The Duke was surprised at himself, suggesting that he had simply gone crazy, and unconsciously covered his mouth. His interlocutor saw that something strange was happening to the Duke before his eyes, and he tried to bring him out of some semblance of a trance. Damien turned to Lord Spencer, coming closer to him, and he said that if he was looking for forgiveness, then let him tell his wife to apologize directly to her. And the Duke, hovering over his interlocutor, asked not to waste his time. He trembled in fright. Damien turned sharply and left the taken-aback lord. He said that he had to go before someone inflicted even more serious insults on his wife. Then suddenly a scream was heard. The Duke saw an overturned but empty sleigh and a cane on the ice. Chloe lay flat on the ice. The icy water had already wet the bottom of her dress and her legs. The ice beneath her was cracking. Soon the ice could not stand it, and our heroine sank. Through her foggy consciousness, she could not understand what was happening to her. Chloe was very cold. She thought with horror that she would die like this. The girl would so like to see her father and Gilles again, to walk with them in the garden at the Verdier estate. She wanted to hear her father call her in affectionate words once again, and how the guy calls her "milady." Chloe was already saying goodbye to life, accepting the inevitable. But when she stopped struggling, strong male arms grabbed her. And soon, on the shore, the Duke performed mouth-to-mouth artificial respiration on his drowned wife. Water was dripping from the girl's head. She began coughing convulsively and spitting out water. When Chloe calmed down, she snuggled up to her husband. He, too, was tired and worried. It was sunny, fine weather above the birch castle of the Duke of Tees. The man said that Chloe would need complete rest at this moment. He was also sure that it was incredible luck that his lordship had immediately rushed to her aid. The Duchess was sitting on the bed under the covers, and there was also a maid nearby. The man assured that if the Duke had hesitated even a little, irreparable harm could have been caused to her. The red-haired maid said that she was so glad that everything was all right with my lady. Chloe was deep in thought. She analyzed the situation. After all, the sleigh could not fall on its own. This suggested that she had been deliberately pushed, and it was not difficult to guess who it was. The Duchess pulled the blanket over herself and called the maid Margaret. She wanted to clarify with her that all the guests had left, with the exception of the Marchioness Isabella. The maid answered in the affirmative. She reported that the Marquise lost consciousness at the sight of the unconscious body. Chloe asked where that lady was now. Margaret could not understand why her mistress needed this. The Duchess wearily assured that it was nothing serious, but there was something she had to tell that guest in person. The woman told the Duke that she finally had the opportunity to talk to him. He communicated his readiness to listen to her. At that moment, he was holding a cubic glass of alcohol in his hands. Marquise looked sexy. Her slanted eyes were alluring, and her high and firm breasts were clearly visible in the deep neckline of her dress. Isabella said that everything was exactly as she expected. Prince Johannes's enemy became more and more serious. The fire in the fireplace crackled cheerfully. The lady said that it seemed that the king felt that a rebellion was inevitable. The Duke froze at these words. In response to the man's silent question, the Marquise continued that His Majesty threatened to take her life if she did not bring Demian von Tissy to Swan. The lady asked what he would tell her to take refuge at Winsbury Villa for a while, and she would say that the Duke disappeared without a trace on the way to Swan. Isabella sat down closer to the Duke. She assured Demian that she would help him escape. The lady put her hand on the forearm of the owner of the castle. She asked him not to worry, assuring him that she was and is on his side. Damien reached out to his guest's neck to caress her, and he asked Isabella if she really thought that he would really go to Winsbury on her advice. The woman stammered and assured the Duke that if he did not do this, he would be in danger here. The man noticed that the Marquise had gone cold, and he immediately informed her about this observation. And this always happened when she lied. The maid of honor shuddered. Demina reasoned out loud that a squad of killers would probably be waiting for him in Winsbury, and he believed that he had to be crazy to fall into their trap. The Marquise continued to deny it. The Duke ordered his guest not to pretend to be a complete idiot. He chuckled and assured her that she was exposing herself as a complete ignoramus. The man was surprised that she thought he would ignore the fact that she betrayed him, and decided to team up with the king. The Marquise was trembling all over. Demian poured alcohol from a bottle into a cubic glass with ice. He said that from now on nothing connected them anymore. The Duke said that Isabella now had nowhere to go, and if she fails to lure him to Winsbury, then His Majesty will most likely get rid of her. He said it was entirely her fault. The Marquise, with a tragic face, began to accuse the Duke, crying that if he had not left her after his marriage, she would never have even thought of betraying him. Philosophically splashing whiskey in a glass, the Duke was surprised at what wonderful things his guest was saying to him, and he asked how he could leave her if he never thought of her as his woman. Damian threw the remaining alcohol onto the floor, and he said that it was nonsense to consider himself abandoned. After all, her task was to play the role of his mistress while the investigation into the affairs of the royal family was ongoing. The Duke said that even this would have been unthinkable if she had not been the late Queen's maid of honor. The man also believed that he had already repaid her for her work. The Marquise shuddered. She asked if there was more to their relationship. Isabella knelt in front of the Duke and squeezed his thigh. She assured that if she returned to the king now, he would kill her. The woman asked not to leave her. Demian took the guest by the chin and stroked her cheek with his finger. He spoke to her in a comforting tone. There was a plea in her eyes and there were tears. The Duke stood over her like a rock. He asked in surprise whether she really expected to survive the attempted murder of his wife. I asked her that she hoped he wouldn't find out. The Marquise, feeling that she herself had fallen into a trap, began to retreat back, and she assured that it was not her. She said that she was not even close to the Duchess when she fell into the water. His lordship asked Isabella not to deceive him even more by repeating such a ridiculous and absurd lie. The Marquise was confused and frightened. She rushed after him and grabbed the Duke by the belt, wrapping her arms around him. The woman begged to be saved. She asked him to help her and not leave her. The man turned to her and put his arm around her shoulders. Isabella cried and assured that she did everything only out of love for him. He answered her that it was already too late. The woman buried her face in his grace, the Duke's bare chest. But he was cold towards her and ordered her to get out of his sight immediately. Our heroine approached the door to the guest bedroom. The door was ajar. Chloe heard words of declaration of love for her husband from another woman. The maid, Margaret, was horrified. The Duchess invited the girl to return to her chambers. Damian heard movement behind the door and turned his head in that direction. The man left the room and saw his wife leaving, accompanied by a maid. He called her name. The Duke was surprised that Chloe woke up. After all, the doctor prescribed complete rest for her, and he reproached her for getting up. The girl smiled and said that she wanted to see the Marquise, and apologized to her for causing a commotion. Damian tiredly leaned on the doors. He assured his wife that Isabella was not able to accept her at the moment, and he advised me to meet with her at another time. Chloe said that since his lordship was also here, she wanted to say something to him too. He communicated his willingness to listen. The girl asked her husband for permission to return to the Verdier estate. The Duke asked why on earth he should do this. The Duchess assured that the misfortune that happened to her gave rise to a passionate desire in her to see her father. She promised it wouldn't be long. Damian said he couldn't allow it. The girl asked the reason for his refusal. The Duke replied that she was now the wife of Damian von Tissa, and not the daughter of Verdier. He assured that the Duchess, true to her duty, would never have entertained the thought of abandoning her husband to his will. Chloe grabbed her cane to lean on. She marveled at the Duke's expectation that she would carry out her duties while he harbored affection for his mistress. The man was stunned by his wife's statement. He grinned and told her not to tell him that she was jealous of him. The Duchess abruptly turned away from her husband. She looked away and denied the feeling of jealousy. Damian, grinning, assured the girl that it was already too late, and he advised his wife to go to bed. He suggested that she return to this conversation about visiting the Verdier estate some other time. Chloe pursed her lips silently. The Duke, rubbing his chin, assumed that they could find a way to avoid separation. The man, as if apologizing, said that now he had to take care of some important matters. As he closed the door behind him, Duke Tease wished his wife good night. Our heroine remained standing motionless in the same place for some time. The moon was shining in the sky, and the snow crunched underfoot. The girl couldn't understand why she felt so exhausted. Chloe walked limping through the fresh snow in only a nightdress, leaning on a cane. The girl reflected that she entered this cancer fully aware of what kind of person her husband was. Our heroine recalled that she had previously promised herself that she would not care about the Duke's personal life. But now she could not understand what she expected from him now. Chloe sat on her knees in the snow. She still couldn't calm down her excitement. Meanwhile, the cold was making itself felt. She wanted to run away so badly. Tears dripped from her cheeks. She thought that if only she could, she would return home in a heartbeat. The girl did not want to stay here for a single second. A fire was burning in the stove of a simple house. It crackled as it heated water in the kettle. The groom Gilles served the lady a cup of hot tea. He was worried if the girl was okay. Chloe asked him for forgiveness. She supposed he was a little taken aback by her unexpected visit. The guy asked my lady what happened to her. The Duchess interrupted his questions mid-sentence. She insisted there was no reason to worry, and she just suddenly felt homesick. The girl squeezed her frozen toes, which when heated caused her severe discomfort. The face expressed a serene smile. The girl said that she thought that when she saw Gilles, she would feel as if she had been transported back to her father's house. The Duchess sipped the tea the servant presented to her with pleasure and some surprise. She thanked Gilles and said that the tea was simply delicious. The guy said that it was incomparable to the very first cup of tea that she once offered him. Chloe, thoughtfully, was surprised that 10 years had passed since their first meeting. The guy corrected that it had already been 11 years since then. The girl warmed her hands on a cup of tea, and on her shoulders there was a warm cape. Gilles looked at her with devoted eyes. The girl said that he looked just like a puppy, and she asked the boy what his name was. A shy blush filled the child's cheeks. He didn't know what to answer, and the girl handed him a cup of sweet and still warm tea. The girl's eyes shone with happiness, and the guy believed that that day she handed him the warmest and most delicious cup of tea he had ever tasted, and Gilles assured that he would never forget it. Chloe thanked the groom for these fond memories of her childhood. She was aware that it warmed her to know that her kindness had made a difference to someone. Gilles turned to Milady. She expressed readiness to listen to him. The guy fidgeted with his cup in his hands, and the kettle whistled on the stove. This got the guy out of his predicament. Waking up as if from a dream, he said that the water had boiled, and he asked the lady to let him know if she wanted another cup of tea. He thought that he wished Chloe wouldn't be in so much pain. The birds greeted the dawn with their chirping. The sky brightened, gradually acquiring warm colors. Chloe, limping, tried to quickly walk along the castle corridor. She blamed herself for falling asleep in Gilles's house yesterday. The girl thought that it was good that no one seemed to notice this. After all, this could cause a terrible misunderstanding. The cane clicked inexorably on the soft surface. Chloe thought that if the Duke found out about this, it would have serious consequences for Gilles. The girl reproached herself, accusing herself of a rash emotional act. But then she heard the heart-rending cry of the maid. "There's a dead man here!" In surprise, Chloe dropped the cane from her hands. A bottle of red wine lay overturned on the table and spilled in a stream onto the floor. Marquise Isabella lay lifeless on the sofa in an unnatural position. There was an empty glass lying on the floor nearby. It turned out that the already cold body of the Marquise was discovered by her maid, who accompanied her from Swan. The Duke and his wife sat in the office and both listened attentively to the speech of the chief of police. The guy said that during their investigation, a bottle of arsenic was found in the Duchess's chambers. He stated that the same type of poison was found in Marquise Isabella's teacup. Chloe swore she had never seen such a substance, but the police officer claimed that it was nevertheless found in her room. The policeman was writing something down in a notebook. He also claimed that there were witness statements proving the Duchess's hostility towards their guest. Chloe was completely at a loss and was wringing her hands in despair. Her face expressed sadness and surprise at the same time. Demian coldly clarified who dared to assume such a thing about his wife. He clarified in surprise that the policeman wanted to say that the Duke's wife was directly involved in the murder of the Marquise. The policeman apologized to his lordship, and he assured that he could not reveal the identities of the witnesses for the sake of their safety. He also asked to take into account the fact that the only person who was allowed to enter her ladyship's chambers, excluding the Duchess herself, was her maid. Chloe began to tremble slightly. The Duke placed his hand on hers, squeezing slightly. He said that his wife was not capable of harming anyone. His lordship assured that even if the Duchess was guilty of the crime, she would have had to pour the poison into the teacup overnight, but she was extremely busy at the time. He winked lustfully at his wife. Chloe remembered what she did that evening and that night. The policeman said that he would like to ask her ladyship a question directly. He wondered where she had been last night. The girl wrinkled her dress and mumbled something inarticulate. Demina said what he could say instead of his wife. He gallantly kissed his wife's hand. And looking at the guy, he assured that his precious wife was with him all that night. The policeman felt somewhat awkward at the sight of tenderness between the aristocratic spouses. Our heroine was led into the chapel. She was given an order that, according to it, Chloe was to remain here until the start of the trial. There was untouched food on the table, fried eggs and a couple of pieces of toast bread. As the cup of tea cooled, it released aroma and clouds of steam. 3 days have already passed. The cane lay on the floor, and Chloe, dressed, lay on the official bed of the temporary detention cell. The girl wondered if she herself wanted Marquise Isabella to die. After all, it was no secret to anyone that her feelings for the deceased were far from positive. But Chloe never wanted anyone to meet such a fate, and her resentment was not directed at the Marquise herself. The Duke said that he heard her refusing to eat. The girl got out of bed. Demian assured that his wife would starve herself to death if she continued in the same spirit. He stood with his back against the door. The man was picking up Chloe's cane from the floor. She replied that her death by starvation would save the executioner from work. The husband was surprised that her speeches showed her desire to die. Demian said that the police questioned his testimony. After all, they find it unusual that the couple, having spent the night together, were found separately in the morning. Chloe rose sharply from the bed and began to assure her husband that she did not kill the Marquise, and she assumed that someone could have planted poison in her chambers to frame her. The Duke said that if this was so, then most likely it was done in her absence, and he asked his wife where she was that very night. The man began to caress Chloe's cheek. He asked why she didn't tell police she spent the night at Gilles' house. There was a silent question on the heroine's face. Demian said that their groom came to him and made a fuss. The guy was kneeling in front of the Duke. He asked his lordship to listen. He assured his lordship that Lady Chloe had done nothing wrong. It seemed that Gilles was ready to rush to the police, and it took a lot of effort to calm him down. While Chloe remained silent for 3 days, her husband was still thinking. Why did she, despite having a witness who would immediately confirm her innocence, decide not to mention it? The girl replied that not a single nobleman would want rumors to spread about his wife and servant. Damien was surprised that this was the real reason. The Duke asked if the wife was sure that it was not because she wanted to protect the head groom, with whom she had secretly spent the night. He also speculated that she was afraid that her infidelity might cause the Duke to divorce her, and then her family would fall into decay again. Chloe replied that she had committed a crime, just as she had not been faithful to her husband. She sat rocking. His lordship said that in this case, let Gilles testify so that she remains alive. The Duke said it was pointless to say that she could not avoid divorce, or that her family would not fail. The man understood and mentally told himself that he was well aware of the fact that Chloe Verdier was not capable of making such a decision. Damien understood that she would never sacrifice her loved ones to save her own life. He ordered Chloe to beg for his forgiveness. He insisted that even if the court did not accept his testimony, at least he still had the power to save her life. The man raised his hand to his wife's face and began to caress her cheek. She wrapped her arms around his hand. The man grinned, expecting his wife to beg him. After all, he was the only one who could save her. Chloe said that if the Duke had such power, then she asked for her execution to be carried out secretly. For Damien, his wife's words were a complete surprise. He even froze in place with his mouth open in surprise. Chloe announced that this was her last request as a duchess. Tears flowed uncontrollably down her cheeks. Further events take us to the courthouse. The judge clarified that according to his lordship's testimony, he was with the Duchess on the night of the murder between midnight and 6 o'clock in the morning. The Duke stood in the witness box. Mr. Judge asked him if his testimony had changed. Damien remembered the tear-stained face and the last will of his wife as a duchess. Now Chloe sat in the dock with her dull gaze downcast. The Duke said that everything was correct. The judge then asked the witness to explain the fact that the next morning he was found in his own office. Damien asked what this had to do with his testimony. The judge clarifies whether there were witnesses who saw the Duke and his wife together. The Duke was surprised that he was accused of perjury. The judge asked Duke Tease not to dramatize. Indeed, in the absence of witnesses, his testimony was not credible. Damien slammed his hand. He asked what if he said that there was such a witness. The lawyer announced that he was petitioning to summon Gilles Watteau, a servant of the Birch Castle. The girl was discouraged. The door opened with a creak. And on the threshold of the courtroom, a new witness in the Duchess's case appeared. The guy took the witness's seat. The judge traditionally asked the new witness in the case to swear an oath to tell the truth. Chloe mentally reproached the servant Gilles, not understanding what he was even thinking about. The groom stated that he could confirm the fact that on the very night when the Marquise was poisoned in the castle, he saw the Duchess and her husband together. The judge asked why Gilles decided to remain silent about this until now. The guy said that it was all because he sinned by spying on the intimate life of his owners. Damien insisted that it was no good, and he asked the groom to speak more clearly. The guy said that being completely exhausted after a whole day of serving the masters, he tossed and turned all night, and at some point I realized that I was unable to sleep. Gilles said that he heard sounds in the middle of the night, and decided, since he could no longer sleep, to go and find out what was happening there. The groom said that when he went outside, he found the Duke and Madame Chloe quarreling. Then he realized that it was nothing serious. It was an ordinary marital quarrel caused by a misunderstanding over the Marquise. However, the dispute quickly came to an end. The guy said that after that the owners headed to the barn, and he is unable to contain his curiosity. Gilles said that he had committed a grave sin by spying on the most indecent moments of their lives. The judge clarified to the witness that he had remained silent all this time only to hide such a minor offense. The guy said that for servants like him, even seemingly minor offenses had consequences that influenced their subsequent lives. The Duke of Tees walked up with his groom. He said that he would personally investigate Gilles Watteau's misconduct as soon as the trial was completed. It was only then that Chloe realized that her husband and servant had agreed on their testimony in court. The girl admired their courage and dedication, but she also understood that such a lie could lead to serious consequences for all three. The judge said that he was unable to pass a sentence based solely on the servant's testimony. Therefore, he announced a postponement of the sentence for 10 days. Damien furrowed his brows. He was surprised that his wife was going to be kept in a cold prison cell for 10 long days. The man assumed that the harsh winter of his duchy had completely deprived the judge of his sanity. Mr. Judge was outraged by his lordship's rudeness, and he asked him not to forget that he was authorized by the king. Damien insisted that he intended to treat the royal judge with the utmost courtesy, and he declared that his patience had run out. The Duke took it out of his inner pocket and held out a piece of cloth with a button on his palm. He assured that the doctor of the House of Tees discovered this in the mouth of the late Marquise. Damien said that similar buttons are used on the robes of royal servants. He said that he ordered the doctor to remain silent for the good of the royal family. However, if the persecution of his wife continues, he will have no reason to keep the secret. Chloe was completely at a loss from the turn of events in court regarding the death of Marchioness Isabella in the castle. Duke Tisi said that he did not understand what the bailiff was waiting for. After all, the royal maid was the main suspect, and he called for arrest that very second. The events described below unfold 10 days later. The girl sits on the bed with her legs tucked under her. The servants were talking among themselves. One of them said that she had heard that the king allegedly tried, with the help of the Marquise Isabella, to kill the Duke of Tees. The girl said that because the Marquise failed, the king ordered to get rid of her in order to hide the plot. Another maid was surprised how they still had the impudence to slander Lady Tissa. She heard that Johannes was mentally ill, and perhaps that is why the royal family was wary of the Duke. The Duke probably knew that this incident would ruin his relationship with the royal family. But despite this, he came to her ladyship's aid. The maidservants thought it was quite romantic. Duke Tis sat in the evening reading a book. They knocked on his door and entered without a report, creaking the door. Damien raised his head and saw his wife. The lame woman approached him. The man, staring at the book again, said that he did not invite her to his place today. Chloe said he looked exhausted. The Duke said that his fatigue must be nothing compared to hers. The fire crackled comfortably in the fireplace. The man asked his wife not to stand like a pillar but to sit down. Chloe said it was already late. She offered to bring her husband some tea to help him sleep. The Duke chuckled, thinking. He stated that this evening he was in the mood to drink alcohol, not tea. The man turned the page of the book. After a short silence, he asked his wife what she was thinking so hard about. Chloe put her cane aside. She said there was something she had to tell Damien tonight. The Duke grumbled dissatisfiedly, suggesting that this could be another request from his wife to return to the Verdier estate. He slammed the book shut in irritation. The man assured Chloe that he was very tired today, and he asked her to come see him tomorrow. But Chloe said that she wanted to express to his lordship her deepest gratitude for the help provided. Damien asked what she wanted from him, and he assured her that she would not get permission from him through flattering speeches to visit her father at the Verdier family estate. But the girl denied her husband's assumption. Chloe insisted that she only wanted to thank him for protecting her. And despite the inevitable conflict with the royal family, he did everything in his power to save his wife. The girl said that even though a lie was told during the trial, no one suffered from it, not excluding Gilles. The Duchess said that when her husband visited her in the chapel, she allowed her pride to cloud her judgment. Instead of trusting him as your spouse and asking for help, Chloe sincerely apologized for this. The Duke asked if she felt resentment because he did not immediately reveal the identity of the culprit, thereby subjecting her to such ordeals. The girl said that she was well aware that she could not help but take into account his relationship with the royal family. Damien said that he could remain silent, and thereby allow her to be executed. Chloe replied that he didn't do it. On the contrary, he made enemies in the royal family, even though he didn't have a good reason to do so. And that mattered to her. The Duke asked what she wanted to tell him. The girl replied that just like he showed unwavering devotion as her husband, so she was going to fulfill her duties with all her heart. Damien asked sarcastically. What emerges from her words is that before this, her wife tried half-heartedly. Chloe asked her husband, why hasn't he consummated their marriage yet? The Duke considered her question strange during an expression of gratitude. Chloe replied that she dared to disagree with him. After all, the Duchess's duty was also to ensure continuation of the family. Damien clarified that she only asked because of this. The girl replied that she did not mean anything else. The Duke said that he was ready to answer her question. He stood up and walked around the room a little, collecting his thoughts. He said that he had not yet fallen so low as to use his power to gain intimacy from a woman who showed nothing but contempt for him. Damien said that if this was enough for an answer, then he would invite her to return to her chambers. He said that it was already late, but she never tired of reminding him of this. Chloe's pulse was going through the roof. She admitted to herself that just 2 weeks ago she was completely confident in her opinion of her husband. Before, the Duke seemed cold and ruthless to her, and she considered him a rude, arrogant, and selfish person. He hasn't changed a bit since their first meeting, and Chloe could not understand why. Then she felt that her resentment towards her husband was disappearing. She didn't understand what it was about Damien that made her dislike him. The heroine remembered the first time she saw Duke Tease through the window, and I was delighted with his personality. She thought that those old feelings had already been completely erased. What Chloe wanted to convey to her husband today was not her gratitude. The girl realized that she no longer hated Duke Tissa. She ran up and hugged her husband, throwing her cane aside. The heroine would like to understand why she felt so unusual. She was attracted to Damien with all her being. The man did not force the girl to ask for affection. He kissed her thigh passionately. Chloe sat a little confused, but did not resist the unexpected caresses of her husband. He kneaded her thigh, continuing his sexual caresses. The girl tried to object to him through her moans. Damien placed his wife's sore leg on his shoulder, and he began to caress her with his tongue, while simultaneously caressing her buttocks with his hand. His hand slid to Chloe's, fingers intertwined. The Duchess was still trying to tell him something, and he squeezed her hand, unable to restrain himself any longer. The man was on top of his wife between her thighs. She moaned from languor. He hummed with pleasure, making rhythmic movements of his hips. The sweat of lovemaking flowed down Damien's face. He was completely focused on his wife. At some point he paused, prolonging the pleasure, and began kissing the girl. The Duke was well aware that Chloe was simply unlucky at dawn on the day of Marquise Isabella's death. Then they reported that she was dead. The Duke's assistant believed that the royal palace intended to declare war on his lordship, and Damien had no doubt that they had sent a marquise to his castle to keep a close eye on him. The guy said that the maid Isabella took from the palace was definitely guilty, but there was no evidence of that. And he believed that having received them, Duke Tease could use them for his own benefit. Damien argued that if there was no evidence, then they should have created their own. He ordered to visit the doctor, and he himself wrote something fluently on paper. He suggested hinting to the Red Veil that members of the royal family were trying to spy on the Duke with the help of their mistress. And as soon as it became useless, they got rid of it. Damien said that since the king had laid the groundwork, it would be right to answer him accordingly. The Duke saw his wife as she walked from Gilles to the castle. He saw the cape she was wearing and understood where she was returning from. The man cursed to himself. He wondered what he had to do to get her to play by his rules. Damien asked Lord Weiss about the reason why he swore an oath of allegiance to him. The man answered with a smile that it was a sign of gratitude for saving his life on the battlefield. The Duke asked the Lord's opinion whether a woman was capable of feeling in debt in this way. And then he decided to adjust their plan. He ordered the man to go to the Duchess's chambers and place the vial in her bag. It was a fine day over the birch castle of the Duke of Tees. The birds chirped merrily. The maids were talking. It was said that her ladyship was out for a morning walk. Another noted that Lady Chloe had been going to similar workouts a lot lately. The maid said that the weather was good, and it was a sin to remain locked up. But the third of them was sure that the lady was definitely not walking for the sake of the weather. She noticed that whenever the lady went out unaccompanied, she always returned in the company of his lordship. It seemed that the Duke and his wife had become quite close lately, and they undoubtedly had everything. The blonde said that she remembers how Lady Chloe first came to Birch Castle. Then the relationship between the gentleman and his wife did not look so promising, and there was nothing surprising about that, considering all the rumors that were circulating at that time about the affair between his lordship and the Marchioness Isabella. The maid claimed that she was horrified when the mistress was accused of murdering the Marquise. The girl assumed that apparently then they fell in love with each other. When his lordship saved Lady Chloe from certain death, she found it quite romantic. The maid with blonde hair expressed confidence that everything had happened with the Duke and Lady Chloe long before. Damien kissed the girl. She wrapped her arms around his neck. His hand slid below his wife's waist. Duke pushed Chloe onto her back onto the picnic blanket. The basket stood closed, and next to it lay a red apple. Another maid asked the speaker, and she explained that it was about the feelings of the gentleman. She was convinced that they had fallen in love with each other long before that event. The girl asked his lordship why he was so stubborn. The man replied that he is who he is. Damien took a bite of the apple. The girl was nervously buttoning her clothes. She reproached him for not paying attention to her request to refrain and not interfere with her picnic. The Duke was making fun of himself. He asked if it ever occurred to his wife that it was she herself who was preventing him from fulfilling his duties. The girl replied that she didn't think so. Chloe worriedly said that she didn't think it was necessary to try to conceive so often. The Duke leaned over his wife. He assured her that he was not doing this for the sole purpose of having a child. He said that, of course, ensuring the birth of an heir is one of their most important responsibilities, and he assured his wife that he did not intend to do anything without a clear goal. Damien played with a strand of the girl's hair. He insisted that all he wanted was to have a nice time with his wife. The man began to unbutton his shirt. He said that no matter what their end goal was, the more they tried, the better. The Duke had his wife sitting on his lap. Her dress was lowered from her shoulders. They copulated passionately. At this time, their young groom Gilles was watching them from the bushes. The girl thought she heard a rustling in the bushes and turned towards the sound. She said she thought someone was there. The husband replied that it was not important and continued to kiss his wife's breasts. But Chloe remained tense. Her husband urged her not to pay attention. He assured her that when she was with him, and even when she was not, he expected his wife's full attention to be directed only to him. Damien said that it was her duty as a duchess, and throwing her onto her back, he brought his face closer to hers. The man merged with his wife again in a long kiss. The girl answered him, "Yes, my lord." If someone had asked Chloe what she valued most in a spouse, she would have paused for a moment before answering. The girl put it on a saucer. She pondered the question. Her answer was that he was an extraordinary planner. Chloe said that her husband always kept her informed of his location, and immediately reports if something happens. The maid believed that the example given had nothing to do with planning. The Duchess said that was all that came to her mind, but she thought that if she were asked about his vices, she could easily name a dozen of them in great detail. The maid continued to show verbal delight. With shining eyes, she asked my lady if her heart did not melt at the sight of his eyes blazing with passion. Chloe, sipping tea, said that most often her husband's eyes reminded her of an icy lake. The maid said that the master returned just 5 days after he went to the royal palace, that he was in such a hurry to be reunited with her ladyship. The girl assured my lady that the gentleman simply could not bear being separated from her even for one moment, and she insisted that this is called love. The maid said that Lady Chloe seemed to be the only one who did not realize this. The Duchess flushed. It was obvious that she was excited. But after thinking a little, the girl shook her head. She denied that it was an expression of love. After all, she believed that the Duke was not capable of such emotions. The red-haired maid began to quietly tell her mistress what she had heard from the other maid. Then the girl began to whisper something quietly. The Duchess opened her mouth in surprise, and the cup fell out of her hands onto the floor. She couldn't believe what she heard. Chloe hurried, limping through the forest. She was impressed by what she had recently heard from the maid. The redhead said that Gilles decided to leave the estate, despite his lordship's assurances to turn a blind eye to the incident mentioned during the trial. The maid assumed that he must have been embarrassed to stay here, and she reported that the guy would leave Tis by train this evening. It looked like he was in a hurry, and now Chloe, limping, tried to walk quickly. She hoped with trepidation to still find Gilles in his house before his departure.